Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Was Confronted by a Magical Cat? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Midoriya Izuku laid in bed staring idly up at the ceiling. Summer break lacked the mystique it used to have. He'd only grown more distant from his school friends as the years have passed. Now on the cusp of going into junior high, it didn't look like that trend was changing anytime soon. As amazing as they were, especially his oldest friend, Bakugo Katsuki, he just couldn't summon the effort to deal with their words. Kaken, he closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. He was lifted from his funk by the light knocking on his door. Izuku, honey. Yeah, Mom? The door cracked open, revealing the gentle smile of his mother. A package came in today. Her smile grew slightly. It's from your father. Her voice trilled with a note of happiness. The boy immediately sat up. His melancholy demeanor was immediately washed away with excitement. Really? He hopped out of bed in one swift motion, falling into step behind his mother as they headed to the living room. Where is he sending from this time? A large box sat on in the middle of the floor, covered in postage. I believe the latest site he was investigating was somewhere in China. We'll just have to see for ourselves, she replied brightly. The two immediately dug in, opening the box and seeing what goodies it continued. Midoriya Hisashi, despite his rather violent quirk of fire breath, had a passion for history. An anthropologist fascinated with world that has existed before the rise of quirks, only lost in the shift in power. It gave the unfortunate side effect that he was often lost in his studies for months at a time. He did his best to try and keep up with things back at home at the very least. I found it. Izuku held up the small disc, the holomail. He excitedly handed it to his mother, who immediately set it to play. The projector sprung to life and an image of a well-built man in a white t-shirt. Short curly black hair was corralled by a bandana, a confident smile on his face. Greetings from the Sichuan province. The camera turned to a shot out the window of his hotel out toward some mountainous terrain covered in greenery. Looking closely, one could see the remnants of larger buildings. A short drive from the ruins of Chengdu, he continued before bringing the camera back to his face. The dig is progressing well. The findings look promising. If the timetable remains stable, I should be back by Christmas. His smile became a bit more subdued. I wish I could be by sooner, but with the size of the chosen site, there's a lot to sort through. I definitely will make it up this time for winter break. That's a promise. He offered the camera a thumbs up. Inko couldn't quite repress the sigh, choosing to focus on some of the souvenirs her husband had sent. Izuku nearly spoke up, but the hologram continued. After all, next year you'll be moving on to 5th grade, won't you, kiddo? You'll be in junior high before you know it. I trust you've been keeping up with your studies, he smirked. You're a smart kid, Izuku, so I'm sure you'll show them all. The sheer confidence was infectious, even through such an impersonal means. The dark haze of Izuku's earlier musing were washed away by the praise. But that's neither here nor there. As you've probably noticed, I sent some souvenirs for you both. It was a lot for the usual snacks and interesting baubles he tended to send. The family had amassed quite the collection of knickknacks from around the world over the years. Though this box had one addition that was impossible to ignore. It was a small statue of a cat, worn and chipped with age, its right paw placed upon a star. It was surprisingly detailed considering its condition and age. Bundled in with the souvenirs, you likely noticed that statue. The holo recording continued in perfect timing. That little beauty is a genuine artifact from the site. Both Izuku and his mother looked up from the statue in shock. Geddo dismissed it as an inconsequential novelty art piece and said it would be fine to send back. He's too short-sighted sometimes, he added with a small chuckle. I couldn't help but do a little digging into myself in my spare time, having seen nothing else quite like it. I put a copy of my observations in there with it. So keep it safe for me and we can look into together, he offered with a smirk. Izuku may not have the same drive as his father when it came to history, but they both shared an insatiable curiosity and analytical eye. Though uncommon, these bonding experiences were always welcome. All the more reason to look forward to winter. Now this last part of the message is for your mother. His voice gained a softer tone, expression more gentle. Inko darling, I hope you're doing well. I do love my work but miss our time together. He sighed. I promise this time I'll be there. Just a little longer until we can see other again. I'll be sure to make it up to you, he added a cheeky wink. In more ways than one. Like perhaps a night on the town and maybe a stop. Inko blushed quickly, shutting off the holo before it could go anything further. I'll just finish this message up later, she shook her head. Honestly, that man doesn't think before he starts talking. She tried to sound annoyed but happiness was too obvious. Izuku smiled slightly. Their family wasn't perfect but he wouldn't have it any other way. He glanced to the worn statue and frowned a little. Well, it would have been nice if his father was there instead of an old statue. It was a few nights later, moon high in the night sky. Izuku sat by his window just looking up to the stars, a notebook marked, Hero Analysis for the Future. Volume 12 foot. Well over half full, the latest editions added from his usual scan for any interesting villain fights that broke out that day. It wasn't the same thing as doing it in person, but it's not like one could just summon those from the ether whenever he happened to be out and about. He brushed his hand over the cover, lingering longingly on the first word. Hero. It's all he'd ever wanted, a goal that seemed ever more far away the more he seemed to chase it. You should probably give up. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry. Deku means someone who can't do anything. He looked away, anywhere but his notebook. His eye caught his father's statue, the worn cat holding its paw over the star. Beckoning. He stood up and walked across the room, picking it up. It was solid but somehow not heavy. Despite its condition, some of the little details were remarkable. So much effort put into such an innocuous little piece. Just held it in both hands, eventually meeting its stony gaze. Could I be a hero? He asked softly. Is it really so terrible to want that? He wasn't sure who he was asking, but once he started he couldn't stop. I just want to help people. Save them, with a fearless smile. Can't I have that? He wasn't sure when he had started shouting. I would do anything to be a hero. Give anything. He could feel the telltale trail down his cheek as tears welled up. He took a shaky breath and lowered his eyes. I don't know why I'm expecting a reply. You're just a statue. He forced a pained chuckle as he placed it by the window so her could clear the tears from his eyes. He looked up to the posters on his wall. All Might. The symbol of peace. His hero. He knew what he needed right now. He headed over to his computer. Navigating away from the news page to a favorite, the search bar, immediately knowing what he was trying to find. He didn't even notice the slight sound of stone cracking. He's already saved over 100 people. It's only been 10 minutes. It was something about this video, All Might's debut, that always stuck with him. In times like this he always came back. Almost as a reminder, but he'd seen it so many times he knew it by heart. The reactions, the dramatic entrance. Everything. He's laughing. When her first watched it as a kid he could feel the charisma. The power of what would become the symbol of peace. It made him feel like he could do anything. It's going to be okay. Why? He needed to feel that feeling again, to wash away his doubt. To refocus himself. To bury this painful feeling for a little longer. Because I am here. A flash of light was accompanied by the crumbling of rock. Izuku looked away from his computer to the source of the disturbance. The statue was breaking. No, was it even a statue? The cat moved, an outer layer of rock falling away. Its fur was black as the night sky with streaks of pink. Under its paw was the source of the blinding light. The star took on a sleek crystalline sheen radiating with power. It shifted impossibly between colors with no rhyme or reason, unlike anything he'd seen. The young boy tried to speak, say anything, but no words would form. What was he witnessing? Your heartfelt wish, a voice, light and gentle, reached his ears. Your pure, selfless desire to protect others. It has awakened me. The cat looked him directly in the eyes. An piercing golden gaze. It was talking to him. Step forward, human. He moved his paw and the star-like gem began to float slowly toward him. Grasp the stone and accept its power. Izuku found himself moving forward, hand reaching out. Was this a dream? His hand shook as it grew closer, slowly taking the star into his palm, sending a tingling sensation up his arm and through his body. Though powerful enough to move his hair and clothes from sheer pressure. It was the gentle warmth he remembered, much like the voice. The shifting color moved in a strong forest green, the light casting shadows all around it. Close your eyes and speak the words in your heart. The voice commanded. He closed his eyes, hot tears escaping in the process. He gripped the crystal tighter, its power surging with his own emotion. Responding in kind. This had to be a dream. But if it wasn't? A small whimper escaped his lips as hope bubbled forth. This was insane. But if it's true, I want to be a hero, he shouted, voice cracking with emotion as the power seemed to only increase. Another phrase implanted itself in his mind, escaping his lips before he could really understand what he was saying. Pretty guardian. Transform. The world went white. An unimaginable rush of power blinded him to everything around him. In the distance he heard the gentle voice one last time. Your wish is granted. He could feel the power moving through him with purpose. It began with his arms before moving to his legs, all converging to his torso before surging up through his head in dizzying display. The light faded as did much of the power, but Izuku could still feel it. The gentle warmth settled on his chest, radiating through the rest of his body. Under that all was a strange feeling he couldn't quite place. Before he could put much thought to it, all the former statue spoke, currently seated proudly on his bed. A successful awakening. It sounded pleased, tail flicking behind it left and right. How do you feel? It feels nice if a bit strange, he admits, clearing his throat a little. His voice sounded. He looked to his hands to see a pristine white glove. Gloves? His gaze ventured lower as the cat began to speak again. Indeed, the divine vestments of the guardians. They may look frail, but they are empowered with powerful protection and dash. Why am I in a skirt? Izuku screamed, voice shrill and panicked. He grabbed at the leotard top frantically, trying to get it off. Though as her grabbed the fabric, he felt something else under it. Izuku touched his chest once again, hands shaking. It was small, but there was a subtle difference. Unfamiliar fear rose as Izuku checked lower. Why am I a girl? He squeaked, body trembling as her brain tried and failed to make sense of what was happening. You mean you weren't female? The cat said with an even mix of reluctance and confusion. Of course not. Sorry. The cat placed one of its forepaws behind its head in a disturbingly human gesture. You humans look so similar it's hard to tell. Izuku, are you okay in there? Inko's worried voice trailed through the door. Fortunately, she was too polite to barge right in. Izuku turned to the cat, trying to keep the bare minimum of calm. Turn me back, she whispered fiercely. The cat flinched at the intensity and started to lose its own composure. If you touch the gem again and think about changing back, it should work. The level of uncertainty in the cat's voice was not comforting, but she followed the instruction immediately. Placing her hand on the gem, ignoring the other feeling on her chest, and desperately thinking about changing back. The radiant power left along with the outfit, the crystal star remaining behind. Back to normal. Thank goodness. Izuku's voice didn't change back. Reluctantly reaching back down. The outfit was gone, but I'm still a girl. The doorknob clicked as her mother opened the door. The cat was giving a frantic, jumbled apology, but it was all too much. Panic having topped out at its maximum level, her mind shut down, instead toppling over to the floor in a dead faint as her mother opened the door. Break. 2 fainting spells later, one for mother and daughter, with a much-needed hour of calm assurances, the Midoriyas found themselves opposite the former statue. Side by side, their resemblance had grown even more obvious. Izuku's features had grown softer, her former mess of curly green hair edging more into the wavy territory, but her clothes did well to hide any of the more obvious changes. Inko gripped her child's hands, returning every tentative squeeze. Neither were quite over the shock of it all. Needless to say, it made for a tough audience, to say the least. The cat cleared its throat, trying to figure out where best to begin. I suppose I owe you both an explanation. Izuku tensed but didn't speak up. I am Aylward, chosen keeper of the hope of Deveria. I hail from kingdom afar beyond the veils of this reality. The statement was absurd, even from a talking cat. But his tone held no room for doubt, stated as purely a fact. I was sent to this world by my master to prepare an intercept force to stop an invasion from the Darkkin. Ones who all but ruined my home in their conquest. He looked down, placing a paw on the star-shaped gem on the table. My master forged this gem from purest magicite, designed to awaken latent magical power of those who open themselves to it. All in the slim chance we could prepare your world to brunt the vanguards of darkness and give you a fighting chance against their forces. That is certainly a lot to take in, Aylward. Inko said carefully but frowned slightly. But that does not excuse rashly recruiting my son without even informing him of what that power might do. Her voice firmed up in defense of her child. The keeper bowed its head in shame. Ah, your words strike true, Lady Midoriya. I was blinded the rush of my awakening and the pure desire of your son. But that does not clean away the stain on my honor. Mom, it's okay. Izuku spoke up for the first time, a slight cringe from hearing her new higher voice once more. I was the one who took the gem when it was offered. I've always wanted to be a hero. This isn't exactly what I had in mind, but if it can help protect people, I'll do what I can. Izuku, his mother's anger drained away, looking at his son-turned-daughter in awe. Aylward, how long do we have? Do you have any idea when the invaders are coming? Her voice trembled a bit, but her expression was resolute. Both cat and mother could see the young girl's heroic spirit shining through. Yes, in the vaguest sense. Aylward began solemnly. I have to be put into stasis to cross the dimensional veil, but my master was skilled in many disciplines. A clear hint of pride entered his voice. Tapping into his visions, he told me after the passing of the second millennia, on the shortest night when the moon sat full among the stars, the Darkkin would come. He said I would awaken to the wish of the one who would save this world. There could already be scouts hidden within your society, looking for Dash. He looked back up, but his grim gaze was met by complete confusion. What? I'm not sure quite how to put this, Aylward. Inko bit her lip. What most people would consider the second millennia passed over 200 years ago. What? You must be mistaken. He looked between both mother and child. Something must be off in the interpretations. How could your world not be enslaved to Darkkin? If this invasion was that long ago, it would have happened sometime during the second or third generation quirks. Izuku muttered thoughtfully. Much of that time was lost to history due to social uprising due to quirks. Civilized society all but collapsed. But if an outside force attacked and galvanized the populace, those early quirk users must have fought the invasion back. But that would mean, after all of my master's sacrifice to get me to this world, I failed. The keeper shook, a few droplets falling to the tabletop as his body shook. I sat as a useless ornament while you defended your own world. My only action being ruining a young boy's life with my own arrogance. Izuku and her mother exchanged a glance before the elder Midoriya moved forward and placed a hand on the cat's back, causing him to flinch. She shushed him softly and stroked his back. It's okay, it's not your fault. The shaking grew more prevalent before the dam fully broke, the chosen keeper of hope bawling like a child while Inko comforted him. He didn't resist as he was picked up, burying himself in the hold as he let out all his pent-up emotions. It took a few moments, but slowly Aylward began to calm. Thank you, Lady Midoriya, he spoke softly, still choked with emotion. I apologize for that unsightly display. There's no reason to apologize. Inko assures the keeper as only a mother could. He motioned for her to place him down. She complied, placing him back on the table. He looked to the gem. The hope of Deveria. He took a deep breath. My master created me for two purposes. To find and train worthy guardians in this world. Aylward bit his lower lip before continuing. And to lead those guardians against the invasion that was to befall them. He hung his head down. I may have failed in the latter goal. But Dash, he brought his gaze up to Izuku with fierce determination. I can still fulfill the first. The Keeper of Hope seemed to exert the same overwhelming presence it did when it awakened. Inko's eyes widened, fully understanding now that this being was one of immense power despite its appearance. Midoriya Izuku. Izuku slowly stood up from the couch, looking at the otherworldly being in awe. "Why yes," she answered softly. "You wish to become a hero." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Despite that, Izuku found herself replying, "Yes." Her new voice cracked awkwardly as tears came to her eyes. "If you are willing to accept my training, I will do my very best to help you fulfill that desire." Elward closed his eyes. "On that honor of my master's soul." Inko nearly spoke up, concern bubbling up as the atmosphere grew tense. But she stopped. The look of joy and hope in her child's face held her tongue and brought tears to her eyes. Long ago she gave up on Izuku, a moment that killed her inside for the years that followed. However strange this turn of events, it had reignited that hope. She closed her eyes, feeling her own tears coming as she waited for the response she knew was coming. "Yes." Izuku managed to choke out. Reality set in the next day. Inko had nearly put the whole thing aside as a particularly strange dream, though it was hard to deny when she came into the living room to see the cat-like being sitting on the couch with a book open, several others on the floor. She steadied her rapidly beating heart and repressed the growing urge to scream. His ears perked and brought his attention her way. He offered one of those odd smiles a cat shouldn't be able to do. "Good morning, Lady Midoriya." His gentle deep voice edged away some of her fears. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself of this same creature's vulnerability from the night before, and she felt the rest of her nerves melt away. "Good morning, Aylwardson." It didn't make it any less awkward though. "You seem to have kept yourself busy last night." She noted the book pile as she made her way to the kitchen and start the morning preparations. "Did you have trouble sleeping?" "Oh, I don't sleep. I am a creation of magic despite my appearance." He admitted with no shame, "I am blessed that I was granted such a high level of autonomy, but in the end you can't change who you are," he said with a hearty chuckle. The page of the book he'd been reading twinkled and turned on its own. "Says the cat who turned my son into a daughter." She couldn't help herself. Petty as it was, she held a little satisfaction as the cat flinched. "Poor choice of words, I suppose." Silence overtook the apartment as Inko went about her normal routine, the keeper remaining perched on the couch reading through his current book, one of the encyclopedia volumes, at an impressive pace. It was only as she was about to start breakfast that another thought occurred to her. Aylwardson." She caught his ear twitch before he peeked up from his study. "Yes." "Do you eat?" To what degree I'm not certain, as I never experienced it myself, but I do believe so, judging from some of my master's other creations," he replied cheerfully. "But you do not have to make anything on my account. I'd hate to trouble you." "Oh no, it's no trouble at all," Inko assured her guest as a good host should. "Besides, it's always nice to have everyone eating together," she added with a smile. "In that case it would be rude of me to decline, would it not?" She heard him chuckle as his tiny head dipped back out of view. She made sure to adjust the recipe for a small extra portion. The cooking and other prep fell into line as any other morning. She distantly heard the creak of Izuku's door. Too tired to articulate, the new girl muttered something about taking a shower. Something Inko belatedly realized wouldn't go as planned. But it wasn't a dream. A girlish screech came from the bathroom. Inko quickly set the food she was cooking aside and rushed off to the bathroom. She opened the door to find her daughter curled up on the floor, naked and shaking. Inko bit her lip and quickly dropped down to envelope her daughter in a tight hug. "Izuku baby." "It's okay, sweetie, I'm right here." The soft cooing and gentle rocking seemed to work as she shaking slowed. "I'm right here. It's going to be okay." "It really happened?" her voice squeaked out, muffled by her mother's chest. "Yes, baby," she whispered, her breathing slowed to a more comfortable pace. "So even the cat statue thing?" Now more curious than panicked. "Out in the living room reading." Reading? "Yes, he's quite studious," Inko said with a smile, her daughter choking out a laugh. The crisis seemed to have passed. Izuku leaned back and reluctantly looked down at herself, blushing a little bit. "Stand up now," her child complied. Inko, keeping a steady hand on her shoulders, slowly turned her to face the mirror. She can feel her child tense up, but this time she didn't panic. She looked at herself carefully as if trying to decipher something. Inko kept quiet and let Izuku come to her own conclusion. Whatever that might be. So, this is me, Izuku said softly. Her mother nodded and remained silent. The younger girl chuckled a little. Is it sad that I can barely tell? Self-deprecation wasn't an ideal first step, but it was improvement. Inko stroked her hair lightly. You're only 9, sweetie. She couldn't bring herself to add, it will become more noticeable in time. One step at a time. She felt Izuku tense up and take a shaky breath. Seems she understood the unspoken statement. She always has been a smart child. Right? She swallowed and closed her eyes. This is going to take some time. It will, but you're not alone. Thanks, Mom. She did her best to not tear up but was failing. She took a few breaths and opened her eyes again. I should really clean myself up. She did her best to put on a brave face. Okay, dear. Would you like me to stay here? Please. She blushed darkly. Her mother only smiled in response. Of course, dear. Over a half an hour later, Izuku shuffled out into the living room embarrassed but clean, her mother a step behind. Dressed in shorts and a long tee as she usually would. The only major difference than the night before being her hair. It had not rebounded into the curly mess it usually was, laying almost straight, ticking the back of her neck. It was softer as well, but she suspected that had more to do with the additional hair care products her mother insisted on using than anything. Shaken up, she'd let her mother baby her in the bathroom, and it seemed Inko got a bit overzealous with the opportunity. Doing her best to ignore the foreign, yet not unpleasant, feeling. She looked over to the couch where Aylward was waiting, a pensive look on his face. Are you well? I heard the screaming. The clear guilt in his voice did much to calm the girl's nerves. Just had a little trouble taking it all in, she admitted, forcing a smile. Just some new things I need to get used to. Indeed, Aylward sighed somewhere between relieved and ashamed. Please accept my apologies once more. And no, it's okay. Despite her earlier freakout, the statement was genuine. Meanwhile, Inko had returned to the kitchen to survey what had come of the food she had been cooking before the bathroom emergency. So, I will have to do a bit of salvaging to finish breakfast, but it should be done in a few minutes. Okay. Izuku glanced back over to the couch. The book Aylward had opened was closed and floating to join the others on the floor. Is that your quirk? She asked in wonder. He hopped the short distance to the top of the coffee table. Just a basic bit of magic, he motioning a paw to the now free couch. Please feel free to sit. Alright. She slowly to a seat, glancing over to the keeper who offered him a small smile. So. Izuku, please give me your hand. Aylward cut through the awkward tension like it wasn't even there. Palm up. His calm matter-of-fact demeanor broke no hesitation from the normally jumpy girl. Sure. She offered her hand and he examined it before placing his paw there and closing his eyes. She felt a tingling sensation travel up her arm and go through her body, no unlike the gem from the night before. Shivering a bit, she did her best not to move. It only lasted a few moments before Aylward opened his eyes with a knowing look. Reinforcement, it suits you. Reinforcement? Yes, that is the power the hope woke inside of you. Aylward explained, watching the girl's eyes widen as she looked to her hand in awe. Am I power? She felt a smile twitch at her lips. Small physical adjustments aside, she didn't feel any different than she did before she changed, but somewhere inside her there was something. Her power. Her quirk. How do I use it? What does it do? Do I have to wear that skirt again to get it to work? She began to speak rapidly, stopping only as he raised a paw. One at a time, one at a time. He chuckled as the girl bounced slightly while politely remaining quiet. We will keep to the basics for now. In brief, reinforcement is the magic of strengthening objects and living beings. It's a supportive magic often used by guards and craftsmen, often looked down on by short-sighted apprentices who only value destructive results, he explained calmly. I will show you how to fully awaken your reinforcement after you have had some food. Your control will be very limited but will improve with time. The corner of his mouth quirked slightly. But if you want to fully master your power, you will need to use your guardian transformation. Your power will always be greater while wearing the divine vestments. The girl who had all but been bursting with excitement to that point frowned a bit and sighed. Dang. Izuku gathered herself up. Do not think of the vestments as an obstacle to overcome, they are a tool to support you and protect you. Elward shook his head. If you wish to become a hero without them, you're going to need to work many times harder to reach that level. If that is your preferred goal, I will take that into account when considering my guidance, he states calmly. All right everyone, breakfast is ready. Inko's cheerful announcement ended the discussion for now. They gathered to the kitchen table, a simple breakfast, salvaged as best she could from what she had been cooking earlier. True to form, was still quite good. Elward's own plate a little further in so he could sit at the edge of the table. So I overheard that you two would be working on harnessing Izuku's new power, she led, clearly concerned. The training is nothing too dangerous, I hope? Not at all, milady. Today will be primarily mediation and mental exercises. Elward assured the older woman. Reinforcement is a supportive magic. Even if we were to progress to any practical applications, you have little to worry about it. Thank goodness. Support. Izuku muttered thoughtfully. Support quirks tend to have problems sticking with the public and the rankings, he noted, mostly to herself. A hero team often makes effective use of such quirks. She trailed onward, Inko sighing softly as Elward merely chuckled. In that case, I'll leave you two to that. I need to run some errands and make some calls. She began to gather the empty plates. I would like a professional to check and make sure there are no issues due to the transformation. No offense meant, Aylward-san. None taken. If it will grant you peace of mind, then do what you must. The keeper waved it away with a paw. A professional? Izuku seemed to break away from her musings, looking worried. Yes, if this is permanent, then this has to be properly checked and documented before school starts back up again. Izuku looked down, clearly uncomfortable. Just focus on your training and relax as best you can. I'll make sure this gets sorted out. Have faith in you, Mom. She offered a smile despite her own concerns. Her daughter returned the sentiment. Inko puts the dishes in the sink to soak and grabbed her coat. She spared a glance over to Izuku one last time as she took a seat on the floor with the cat sitting proudly in front of her. She slipped out the door as he began explaining how they would proceed. Outside immediately dialed up a contact, listening to it ring as she made her way out of the apartment building. Inko? A connection was a bit sketchy, but she couldn't help but feel relief hearing her husband's voice. What's wrong? I'm about to head out to the sit-dash. Hisashi, it's about the statue. His voice was direct and full of urgency. The statue? He seemed confused. Oh, did it break in Dielvoy? No, she closed her eyes and took a breath. This is going to sound crazy, but I need you to believe me. She start from the beginning. The burst of light and sounds, Izuku's gender change, Aylward, and the aftermath this morning. She tried her best to keep her composure, but by the end she couldn't help but get more frazzled. The image of Izuku staring at her reflection with that uncertain expression was burned into her mind. That's quite a story, he said with a sigh. I know. It sounds crazy. Inko rubbed her temple with her free hand. But I swear to Yodash. It's okay, honey, I believe you, he assured her softly. Her heart soared, a huge weight lifted. You've never been a woman for flights of fancy, especially not to this degree, he seemed to gather himself. I'm going to make some calls, keep your phone handy, I'll get back to you with some names and numbers. Thank goodness, I wasn't sure who to even begin with. I'll call you soon, love. The phone disconnected and she gathered herself. A weight of uncertainty lessened from her shoulder. With a bit of thought, she decided a nice walk in the park would do her good right now. Soon as she had a plan of action, she'd be able to make some headway. Izuku sat, eyes closed and breathing slowly. Meditation was something that took practice and focus on oneself. Not a common skill set for a 9-year-old. Fortunately, Aylward was assisting. A droning incantation had placed the girl into a trance. Once he had been sure it was set, he began guiding her mind, trying to locate her magic source. It was a little different for each person, so you could never be sure quite how long it could take. Aylward glanced out the window. The sun had already passed its apex and was moving back down. He gave a tired smile. It seemed the people of this world had vastly different magical pathways. Something BB expected, but it meant his own training on the process was being rewritten on the fly. More time passed, the afternoon sky tinging pink when the girl gasped. Elward's ears perked up, her looked up from his book to see his guardian glowing. An aura of faint green wavered just off of her body. Excellent, you found your source. He moved closer and began speaking slow and clear to pierce into Izuku's trance-like state. Imagine your hand moving forward and take the source in your grasp. He watched her carefully. The girl's breathing was increasing, becoming erratic. Concerned, he reached out and touched the wavering aura and closed his eyes. He tried to follow the mental path she had taken. She'd made good progress, but for one so young any more would be a danger. With a flick of effort the trance broke and Izuku toppled backward, eyes wide, catching her breath. But Aylward, I almost dash. You were very close, Guardian, Aylward said respectfully. But you used up too much stamina finding the source. I can keep going, she insisted, but found herself unable to sit up, her own heartbeat pounding in rhyme with a dull headache. Am I so drained? Aylward finished with a small smile. You may not realize, but you've been searching for much of the day. An impressive feat for one so young. She dizzily glanced over to the wall clock and her eyes widened. 3:47 p.m., she squeaked, but we started after breakfast. She sat up fully, she stomach rumbling loudly. She let out an awkward chuckle as she grabbed her stomach. Guess that settles it. Yes, I suppose it does, he replied in a genial tone. Let's see if we can get you a nice snack and something to drink while we take a break. Sure. Aylward kept a careful eye on the girl as she slowly got to her feet and wobbled her way to the kitchen. It was just past 5 p.m. when Inko returned home. After running around all day, it was nice to finally take her shoes off. I'm home, she announced, shifting a paper bag in her arms to properly close the door. With all the craziness going on, she wasn't up for cooking. A night of burgers and fries could be made up for with a healthier choice tomorrow. Mom. Izuku's excited voice carried from the living room. Rapid footfalls preceded a daughter-shaped missile that latched onto her middle. The frills of her divine vestments moving ever so slightly from an unseen wind. The outfit on a whole seemed to add an extra glow of excitement to the girl as she looked up to her mother with a wide smile. I did it. I found my quirk. Already? Inko blinked. The way Aylward spoke of it earlier, it sounded like a much more complicated feat. Magic is guided and powered by emotion. The keeper chimed in, trotting into view and taking a seat, tail naturally curling around his paws. Your child has the drive of a seasoned guardian. If she keeps this up, she's going to a force to be reckoned with. Well, no reckoning anytime soon. Of course, milady, training will progress at a measured pace as we agreed. He relented with a nod and smile. Good, now let's have some dinner. She motioned to the takeout bag in hand. You can tell me all about it then. Right. Izuku let go and started off toward the dining, nearly bouncing with energy in every step. Her skirt and ribbons swaying with each bounce. It took a few moments after she disappeared from view before she squeaked. I'm still in the skirt. Inko exchanged a bemused look with Aylward before both followed Izuku to the dining room. The vestments had been dispersed, leaving her back in her original t-shirt and shorts, cheeks rosy with embarrassment. Aylward chided the young hero in that she was going to need to get used to his outfit, which only received a pouty agreement in response. Inko didn't have the heart to tell her how adorable she looked. In time she would adjust. Ultimately, it would be her daughter's choice what kind of clothes she wanted to wear after all. If it ended up being something cute down the line, well, Inko certainly wouldn't complain. Topics shifted to the training itself, of spirit journeys and finding one's own power from within. So, is this kind of special guardian training regularly done with one so young? Finding one's source isn't unique to guardian cadets. Every citizen goes through it in their childhood to unlock their magic and find out what role they can best fill in society. Aylward explained. Everyone has magic within them after all. Everyone. Inko looked taken aback at the concept. You mean Mom could learn magic too? Izuku asked excitedly, nearly bouncing out of her chair. If she had the drive to, she certainly could, Admittedly, it is harder to start when you're older, but it's far from impossible. Inko took a moment to measure her response. The prospect of learning magic was something out of an old storybook. The temptation was there. But ultimately she ended up shaking her head. We'll consider it later on. The most important thing right now is to make sure everything is right with Izuku, she said firmly. The cat accepted the decision with a simple nod, her child letting out a soft of disappointment. As such, I have scheduled an appointment with a specialist. A doctor? Izuku muttered, shifting a bit in her seat. She is an old friend of your father's. That fact alone seemed to melt the tension from Izuku's shoulders. She'll make sure there are no negative issues with your change, as well help us figure out what we need to do next. When is it? Not until Wednesday, dear. For now we'll take things easy. No need to rush. Inko's smile seemed to fully calm her child's growing anxiety. Now, how about we finish up dinner and you can show me how your reinforcement quirk works? That finally did it. A smile sneaking back onto the young girl's lips. Sure. The evening went on, Izuku showing off her new quirk to her mother. Visually, it wasn't anything impressive, the affected items seemingly coated in a greenish glitter. Its effect, though, was as advertised. A reinforced tomato was thrown to the ground and simply bounced with no bruising or visible damage. Even that little action was enough to make Izuku a bit short of breath, but her bright smile assuaged any motherly worry. Elward assured that in time the drain would lessen and defensive boost would increase, as long as she continued to work hard. Something the young girl had clearly been doing all day. It was a couple of hours after dinner that she began to wear down. She insisted she was fine, but shortly after she dozed off, leaning into her mother's side. Inko let her be, enjoying the calm evening after such a busy day. Her gaze turned over to the cat, who was laying on the coffee table with another book, tail swishing like a pendulum. Elward, she spoke softly so not to wake her daughter. His eyes flicked her direction before his head followed. Yes, Lady Midoriya, he replied in kind. Anyone can use magic, that's what you said. I did indeed. Does that mean anyone can be a guardian as well? She mused lightly as she played with her daughter's hair. To a point. He turned and walked to the table edge closest to Inko. They would have to have a pure and honest desire that could resonate with the hope of Deveria. Magic comes from emotion and the hope only reacts to positive desires, he explained, noting the thoughtful look that crossed the older woman's face. If you'd like to test your compatibility, I will gladly guide you through the process. But I would hazard attempting a guardian contract with Gem, he noted firmly. What? Though I have no doubt you'd make a wonderful guardian, as your daughter no doubt will, the transformation no doubt will cause more problems than you'd like. I mean, I'm already a woman, it's not like I would become a man. Right? No, you are correct. Guardian candidates are universally female. They are also tend to be quite young, he added meaningfully. Inko looked down to her daughter and back to the otherworldly cat. It would make me younger? She whispered, somewhere awe and fear. More than likely, but how young? I don't know. It all would come to how the hope decided to interpret your desire. He closed his eyes. Even if I were to try and assist on your behalf, there is only so such sway I could provide. For the sake of your daughter, I would not risk it. I see, she smiled softly and closed her eyes. It was just a thought. She was not one for flights of fancy after all. But sometimes it was fun to think about. She carefully lifted up Izuku into her arms and started to carry her off to her room. Just before she made it to the hallway, she heard Aylward speak up one last time. I spoke the truth before, for what it's worth. He tilted his head with a smile. You'd make a wonderful guardian, Lady Midoriya. Flatterer. She shot back but returned his smile, leaving the cat chuckling to himself as she went to put Izuku to bed. The checkup was probably the most intensive on Izuku could remember. Samples for everything, quirk assessment, x-rays. The works. On top of all the physical checks, she was later subjected to a long series of questions about her feelings and experiences over the last week. It was exhausting, but her mother rewarded her stress with a trip for ice cream. While enjoying the summer sun, they took a detour through the park. Izuku hadn't really played outside since the change. So much time had been spent focusing on unlocking and testing her new quirk. Though if she was honest with herself, it was also to avoid an inevitable confrontation. "Inko!" A familiar voice called out. Izuku paused mid-bite when she spotted Katsuki and his mother. The elder Bakugo was dressed in comfortable casual wear, much different than her usual business suits. "Mitsuki," Inko smiled, feeling her daughter tense up at the unexpected meeting. She gave her daughter's hand a subtle squeeze while offering a forced smile. They had to do their best to make it seem like everything was normal. It's been ages, and it had been, ever since Katsuki's quirk had manifested. The close relationship between both families had strained. Inko didn't have a large social circle, so it was as much a hit to her as it had been to her daughter. "It really has," Mitsuki smiled broadly. "Say hello, Katsuki." The boy merely grunted in response. This defiance was met with a swift smack on the back of the head. They exchanged glares before he huffed and turned his gaze away. "Hello," he muttered, clearly unenthusiastic. The boy turned his gaze to Izuku, who tried in vain to hide behind her ice cream cone. Before Inko could try and redirect the conversation, Mitsuku had fully approached, ready to chat. "So what brings you out today?" "Well, we had a doctor's appointment. Izuku has been a bit under the weather lately." Inko would be the first to tell you she was not a good liar. She did her best to keep to half-truths without revealing the rather delicate situation. It took a bit longer than expected. "What bring you out today? Aren't you normally working during the week?" Mitsuki was much like her son, so turning the conversation toward her was the best chance to get her talking rather than questioning. "Well, it's been a long time since I took some vacation, so I thought I'd use it to do a little bonding with the brat," Mitsuki said jovially. Mother and son had a volatile but somehow stable relationship. It certainly made it clear where the boy got it from. Inko half expected some outburst or rebuttal, but he was silent. In fact, so was Izuku. The children had ended up a few steps away talking amongst themselves. To be more accurate, Katsuki was talking at Izuku, who wasn't saying much in response. "Hisashi still out of the country?" Mitsuki continued obliviously. Yes, She tried to disengage but found herself pulled back into Mitsuki's need to chat. "So what adventure is Hisashi got himself wrapped up in this time?" she continued to press curiously, and Inko stifled a sigh of resignation. Perhaps she wasn't the only one with a small social circle. Off to the side, the two childhood friends exchanged their own awkward dialogue. "Haven't seen you around much, nerd." Katsuki started out remarkably calm, likely due to both parents being in earshot. "Been avoiding me or something?" "And no, Kaken," Izuku managed before clearing her throat. Her mind raced, having forgotten how different her voice sounded. "You just been sick," she whispered lamely, turning her eyes away. "Well, don't get me sick, minute. You sound all squeaky," he scowled. It's not contagious," she muttered, banishing the brief image of a set-off Kaken in her own divine vestments. It took all of her power not to snort with laughter. This was not the time to be attracting attention. Izuku fell silent, and Katsuki passed an annoyed glance to their mothers chatting away. "Dumb hag, talks about spending time and she goes off chatting." Whether he was annoyed about the outing or the interruption, it was impossible to tell. "That I'm surprised you even noticed," Izuku found herself saying before she even realized she was speaking out loud. A sting in her chest she hadn't even realized was there. "What the hell are you muttering about?" Izuku flinched as she felt his glare land back on her. She tried so just stay silent, but she could feel it intensify. If he kept staring, would he notice? Was there something more distinctly feminine about her now that she hadn't noticed? "Oi, answer me, Deku." I said I'm surprised you noticed I wasn't around," she muttered a bit louder. This time she was heard. The dismissive snort said it all. "Like I could ignore you trailin' behind me all the time." The sting hit a little harder, the sheer bother Katsuki made it sound like. Her existing at all. Her mind trailed back to moments good and bad. Arguments, excitement, conflict, and camaraderie, though as of the present there wasn't much of that last bit these days. She could feel the buildup of moisture, but she held it back. She couldn't start crying now. Not in front of Kaken. "Yeah, well, I probably won't be going anywhere till school starts," she said evasively, keep her voice soft so not to choke up. For a moment she saw a flash of something. Concern maybe, but she probably imagined it. He merely shrugged. Whatever. There fell into silence once more. A few moments later their parents looked to be winding down. Fucking finally. Katsuki muttered, heading back toward his mother. He paused after a step and glanced back. By the way, your hair looks weird straight. Makes you look girly. The casualness blunted some of the built-up pain as she couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. He continued on and she was left to her own thoughts. Her mother returned exchange waves with Mitsuki as both blondes headed out back toward town, muffled arguments all the way. I'm sorry dear, I didn't mean to get pulled away like that. It's okay, it's not like I could avoid him forever. Izuku forced a smile. Her mother's concerned expression caused the earlier hurt to bubble up in her chest once more. Izuku, is everything okay? I don't know why it hurt, she admitted, confused, eyes misting up. It's not like it's any different from when we usually talk. But it did. Oh, sweetie. She squeezed her daughter's hand, who returned the affection. The girl wiped her eyes on her sleeve and said nothing else. They walked in companionable silence, taking the scenic route. Over the next few days her mother tried to bring the topic of Katsuki, but Izuku stifled it every time. The young guardian doubled down on training and improving her new quirk. Control was still hard going for now, so to facilitate proper instruction Aylward insisted all training session be done in the divine vestments. This gave two benefits. Firstly, unlocked the power far easier, making learning the basics. It had the additional effect of getting the girl used to her transformation. The rest of her wardrobe, sans underwear to her mother's insistence, were still boy clothes. If she ignored her voice or trips to the bathroom, she could make it through the day without really considering her new life change. It wasn't exactly healthy, but it worked for now. The divine vestments bore no such illusions. As embarrassing as they felt, the boost of strength and control did much to combat the awkwardness, associating positive feelings with the form. It was only a few hours a day, but even over the first few days it was making it easier to move about, if only just in front of her mother and teacher. The reality of it all only hit harder when the test results came in later that week. For the second time in so many days, Izuku found herself sitting nervously in a doctor's office. To her left was her mother, just as nervous but trying in vain to put up a brave face. The doctor, Metu Aoi, was an old classmate of her father's. They'd apparently kept touch over the years and was trustworthy enough to be brought in on this series of bizarre events. Her quirk, empathy, made her very high demand for therapy field, but her passion ultimately was medicine. Admittedly, it did help in situations like this. A single smile and slight pressure of her quirk removed a large weight of tension from the room. Now shall we begin? Yes, please go ahead. Inko said with a grateful smile. Well, let me say that whatever triggered this transformation did an impressive job, she began, sifting through several papers. Everything was changed down to the DNA with no makes of alteration. It all reads out as 100% natural. If I hadn't been informed of the situation, I would have assumed the before and after were files for a set of fraternal twins. There's no trace left? Izuku asked softly. Dr. Matt cut the girl off before she could go any further. Now Izuku, don't misunderstand my meaning. She placed the papers down and locked her gaze with the young girl. You are still you. Just the you would have been if you were born female. She watched carefully until the girl gave a slight nod of understanding. Her mother took the girl's hand and gave it a squeeze. Now the change aside, you are remarkably healthy, no abnormalities or issues to be found. Even the minor health issues you had previously are simply gone. But I've been feeling really strange. Izuku spoke up to Inko's surprise. Izuku, you didn't mention feeling strange. Well, I didn't want to worry you. How so? What feels strange? I'm not sure how to explain it. I just feel off, physically. Izuku frowned. It's just weird. I thought it was because of the changes, but if everything checks out, what's wrong? She looked up to the doctor, hopeful for an answer. The doctor placed Izuku's files down and mulled over the possibilities. It's hard to say, there's no real precedent for this kind of transformation. Odd cases here and there, but nothing so complete as what you've experienced. My only guess would be that it's a matter of perception. Perception? Yes, physically everything changed over without a hitch, but your mind and memories were not altered. Perhaps you notice the differences more prominently because it's different than what you remember feeling. Even the small natural things you normally don't notice standing out. That seems reasonable. Inko notes, so you think after Izuku has had more time to adjust. These feelings should diminish, yes. Dr. Matu frowned before adding, though I'm not sure how long that would take. It might be best to set up some sessions for Izuku to talk out her feelings and work through these changes. She turned her chair to pluck a planner off of the desk. Is it wise to involve anyone else? Inko asked with a worried frown. There's no need to worry, I was intending on seeing her myself. It's okay really, I didn't mean to make a big thing out of Izuku started, but the doctor merely looked at her to get her to trail away. This is for your own peace of mind, it's really no trouble at all. She dissolved the aura of authority with a jovial smile. Besides, I can have your father owe me a favor for once. The three shared a laugh, easing the tension of the room. Moving on from the raw physical reports, we have the quirk analysis results. This brought Izuku's full attention. According to your previous records, you were quirkless, correct? Why yes. Well, this magic you obtained seems to originate from the same places most emitter quirks do. It's not exactly the same, but it's within the range of natural variation. By all measures of modern medicine, your power appears to be a quirk. Izuku smiled brightly. It only grew as the doctor hung two X-rays side by side. Slight variance in male-female bone structure aside, there was one glaring difference. One had two pinky joints. The other only one. It really changed everything. Inko whispered, still trying to take it all in. Yes, this creature you stumbled upon may hold the key to an even greater understanding of what quirks are. The doctor let that statement hang in the air before continuing on. And it's for that very reason we have to be so careful. If this information got into the wrong hands or became widespread, your guest could end up in a lot of trouble. You're not going to let anything bad happen to Aylward-sensei? Not if we can help it. Dr. Matu returned the X-rays to the file. Hisashi has been forming a small group to start working on this project from the inside. We won't approach the government until we have a firm understanding on what we are dealing with. Assuming Aylward-san was willing to assist us, we should be able to keep this under wraps. He is the agreeable sort, so I don't see why he wouldn't. Inko admitted with a small smile. Unfortunately, it does tie into what you want us to do with this. The doctor placed her hand on Izuku's file. Obviously, we can't report what really happened. True. What did you have in mind? Well, we have two real options as I can see it. The first would to have you cut all ties. Move to a new city, cover your tracks and start fresh. We could adjust Izuku's papers to fit her current gender. With all of Hisashi's work overseas and you being a stay-at-home mother, we could keep this whole magic things out of sight. She shook her head. Obviously that is the most extreme option, but it does pose the least amount of questions. It does seem a bit excessive. Despite what the elder Midoriya said, she had a thoughtful expression. The second would be a compromise, filing the transformation as an extreme side effect to a belated quirk awakening. It's mostly the truth, but we'd have to be very careful to keep a consistent story for the inevitable barrage of questions. It would also likely cause some social strain for you all as the school and neighborhood would be adjust. The aftermath could get quite messy. Oh my. It's not something you should rush into, give it some thought. Either way you decide to pursue this, know that you'll have my support. The doctor reached forward, placed her hand on top of Inko's and Izuku's. Mata-san. Inko blinked away a few tears. Thank you, I'll discuss this with Hisashi when he gets home. So, when is he touching down? The day after next. It's a late flight, but we're planning on meeting him at the airport. Yeah. Izuku smiled brightly at the prospect of seeing her father again. Well, be sure to pass on a hello from me, though I'm sure I'll see him before too long once this project starts to progress. She smirked a little before picking up the file. So, I'll let you two go. I'll be sure to call you later to set up a good schedule for my sessions with Izuku. We will be touching down in Tokyo in 15 minutes. Hisashi blinked back to reality, looking around as the other passengers started to gather their things. He'd been staring out the window, letting his mind wander. How much can change in just 2 weeks? A hell of a lot apparently. The stability of one's job, the gender of your child, and your fundamental understand of magic and its place in the universe. Needless to say, it was a lot to take in. Despite all that, there was one clear route to take. He needed to go home and be there for his wife and son. His mind corrected, triggering a sigh. Guilt and worry warred for the dominant position. There was no way he could have predicted what that statue could do, but he had essentially smuggled it out of the country without fully understanding it. How much had it changed him or her? This is so dim and confusing, he muttered, rubbing his temples. Was Izuku okay? Was she even still Izuku? That thought was quickly thrown aside. He couldn't even entertain that line of thinking. Izuku may have been born quirkless, but her drive to be a hero rarely wavered. If this change gave her that chance, then she was no doubt utilizing it to its fullest. The cabin rocked gently as the plane touched down on the runway. Hisashi broke himself from his thoughts and gathered up his carry-on. The passengers filed out into the airport proper. It didn't take long to spot his wife among the crowd. His heart swelled at seeing her for the first time in months. She offered him a soft smile that melted his heart as it had so many years ago. At her hip, Izuku stood waving with an excited smile. He crouched down and he watched his child come running, jumping into his arms. Light, his mind immediately pointed out, but he ignored it, basking in the exuberant affection. He stood and braced Izuku on one arm, pulling the hug back and looking his child in the face. The features were slightly different, frame a bit slimmer perhaps. But those details didn't matter. Izuku was female. But she was still Izuku. He offered wide grin as he turned back to Inko. It's good to be home. Unable to really go into any details of magic cats and transformations, the taxi ride home was passed with more mundane pleasantries. Hisashi spoke of his travels through China, the sights he'd seen and what they had been studying. Izuku hung on every word, taking anything her father had to say with the utmost focus. Inko felt at ease in a way she hadn't in some time. The Midoriya family was all together once more. Everything would be better now. The sun had nearly set by the time they arrived back at the apartment building. Izuku practically dragged her father upstairs in her excitement. He allowed this with a wry smile, though internally he began to prepare himself. He was about to meet a being from another world. Inko had assured him the creature was of good intent, and he trusted his wife's intuition. Nonetheless, through some unknown means, this being was able to awaken a quirk within his child. It defied all aspects they understood about how quirks worked and manifested. The future ramifications of all this were much more long-reaching. Elward sensei, we're home. Anxiety warred with excitement as the door unlocked and the family entered. The scent of stewed vegetables and skis wafted out from inside. In that case, have a seat, I'm nearly done. A young man's voice replied happily. Curious, Hisashi passed up the dinner table and headed to the kitchen. Atop the countertop sat a black cat, its fur streaked with pink. On the stove in front of it was a large pot simmering away, a large wooden spoon stirring on its own. Elward-sen, you didn't need to do this. Inko chided with a small smile. It is a joyous occasion for you and your kin, is it not, Lady Midoriya? The young man's voice came from the cat's body, motioning his forepaw in a human-like shooing motion. Let me treat you tonight. It turned its gaze to Hisashi and smiled good-naturedly. You must be Milady's husband. It seems I have you to thank for excavating me from where I've been buried. It was nothing, he managed to reply. You were quite the exquisite artifact, he noted lamely, still trying to rationalize everything he was seeing. You flatter me, he chuckled. We have much to discuss, but let it be over dinner. I'm still learning the craft of cooking, but hopefully it will be to your tastes. With a small bow, he went back to his stew, the spoon floating out from the pot so he could taste the broth. The elder Midoriya took the opportunity to excuse himself and head back to the dining room. His wife and child were already waiting, table already set for 4. He sat heavily in the chair next to his wife. That there's a cat making us dinner. Yes, it does take some getting used to, Inko admitted. I'm starting to get that feeling. Hisashi noted, leaning back in his chair. So did you teach him that? Partly, Inko noted with a small smile. After reading all the encyclopedias, he got curious about one of my cookbooks. He could follow the instruction precisely but took some time to understand how the stove worked. Mainly he wasn't very good at adjusting the recipes or understanding tastes, so I offered a few pointers. And I still may need some yet. The keeper's voice came from the hallway, the stew pot hovering into view as the cat trotted into the dining room. The pot landed on the table without a spill and the cat hopped up onto the table after it, sitting across from the rather puzzled man. It offered an oddly human smile and motioned a paw to the pot. Dinner is served. Inko took the opportunity to serve out the portions and all talk was put on hold as the family started to eat. Izuku thought it was a little peppery but still seemed to enjoy it. Inko pointed out the vegetables could have been cooked more thoroughly, while Hisashi stood to get some hot sauce to spice it up. Everyone's tastes were different after all. Elward took the criticism easily, filing it all away for later use. Once everyone was mostly done with their meal, they spoke more freely about the whole situation. Izuku proudly showed off her quirk, using a pair of chopsticks, reinforcing one and not the other and showing the difference. Elward was quick to compliment the child's work ethic and how far she had come in this short time. Hisashi was clearly happy to hear the news, ruffing his daughter's hair, getting her to giggle happily as she basked in the praise. Under great reluctance, and only at her father's request, she donned the divine vestments. She didn't appreciate being called cute, even if both adults were in agreement of that fact. She quickly changed back and was not pouting for the remainder of the evening. There were yet still some important things to discuss, but that could wait. For now they just enjoyed being family again. They all took to the living room, sitting together on the couch and watching television. Inko leaned onto her husband's shoulder, with his arm around her while Izuku nuzzled into his other side. They stayed that way long into the evening, until Izuku began to doze off on the couch. Hisashi carried her to her room and tucked her in as Inko watched from the door. Elward wished the pair good night as they both headed to their own bedroom, spending a night together for the first time in nearly half a year. It was good to be home. With the pleasant night behind them, they sat down in the morning for a much more personal topic. The entire Midoriya family gathered in the living room to discuss the future of their family. Elward gave the three their space, choosing to meditate off in the corner with only his word that he'd continue to support Izuku and the family in whatever path they choose to take. So, Hisashi begun. With Izuku's summer break ending at the end of August, we need to decide what we're going to do about all the changes. He stumbled a bit for lack of a better word. The Midoriya patriarch looked to his child, offering a small smile. So, kiddo, you're the one who's most affected by all of this. What do you want to do? I know it's a lot, consider, dear, Inko said softly. But we're both here to support you, whatever you want to do. I know, Izuku muttered, looking down to her lap. I've been thinking about it since Matu-sensei mentioned it. I don't have a lot of friends, she admitted sadly. Her mother squeezed her shoulder while her father frowned slightly, but neither interrupted her. I have no particular attachment to the school or any teachers. Starting new, without anyone knowing, that was quirkless or a dash. She paused briefly before taking a deep breath and exhaling. Or that I was a boy, she whispered, voice shaky. It was the first time she had said such a thing out loud and meant it. Once school started, she wouldn't be able to ignore it anymore. Boys and girls had different school lives after all. It wasn't just having to wear a uniform. Physical education was separated, changing times, bathrooms. Trying to adjust to all of that. Alongside a school full of students who would know he had been a boy a few weeks ago. It was too much. I figured that would be the case. Hisashi started, but Izuku held up a hand. I'm not finished. Despite all of that, she looked up fully, a shaky determination in her eyes. I want Kaken to know. Izuku, sweetie. Are you sure? Inko frowned, watching her daughter carefully as she gave a small nod. I know we're not close anymore. We haven't been for a while, she admitted sadly. He might not even notice or care if I moved away. She choked up a bit, but collected herself with a wavering breath. Even so, I have to let him know. I don't think it's a good idea, Hisashi said firmly. If we don't make a clean break, it could lead to some obstacles later down the road. He watched Izuku tightly clenched her fists in her lap. He shared a concerned glance with his wife before he sighed. But if you're certain that I am, then we'll try to get that sorted out before the move. Thank you, she muttered, slowly relaxing as her mother hugged her close. Once she had calmed down, she pulled back but kept a loose arm around her, letting her daughter lean against her. We're going to need to start looking into properties and see what is in our range. Inko began softly, passing a concerned glance over to her husband. With only 2 weeks, I'm not sure we could get it all sorted, so little time. True, Hisashi muttered, leaning back in his chair. Maybe if we can explain things a bit to the school, we could cover the curriculum here. He sat back up with a more thoughtful expression. Homeschooling. It's used a lot in America and Europe. But I thought the idea was not to let them know anything? Izuku chimed in worriedly. We wouldn't tell them everything. Just enough. I suppose that could work. But teaching him at home. Wouldn't we need to hire a tutor or dash? I believe I could help you with that much. Elward spoke up, hopping up on the coffee table. Are you certain? Inko looked concerned. Teaching is my primary skill. Many guardian candidates come from out-of-the-way villages with no schools. As long as I have the coursework, I'm sure Izuku would be able to keep pace. She is a wonderful student after all. Sensei. Izuku muttered, embarrassed at the praise. Okay then, just leave talking to the school to me. Hisashi said with a confident grin. And we'll take our time trying to find a good place for all of us. That seems like the best path for now. Inko agreed. Their future was still fairly up in the air, but at least they had some kind of plan now. Izuku didn't have any major problems with the plan as a whole, but if he wasn't going to be in school, that meant she would need to talk with Bakugo before the end of vacation. As the adults and Keeper continued to hammer out the details, she took a breath and forced a smile to her face. I'm gonna head to my room and check the hero news. Okay? She noted cheerfully, hopping off the couch. Okay, honey. Inko replied, a bit puzzled at the sudden announcement. We're going out for lunch, so be sure to clean up before then. She called after her, but she had already turned the corner. Okay, Mom, she shouted back as she shut the door. With a conflicted heart, she slowly walked over to her computer and booted it up. Her heart began to race as she opened up her instant messenger, let out a shaky sigh of relief on seeing he wasn't online. She typed and deleted several messages before finally just leaving a simple, Mighty Fan 1. Hey, Mighty Fan 1, let me know when you're on. She stared at the messages, tempted to go back and delete them both, but held herself back. Seeing as she had the time, she added, Mighty Fan 1. BRB. She stood from the computer and grabbed her bathroom supplies. She headed across the hall with a small amount of reluctance. She tossed her clothes in the dirty laundry and slowly turned to the mirror. She looked at her reflection with a determined grimace. She clenched her fists tightly and refused to turn away. This is me, she said softly, letting out a shaky breath but her gaze holding firm. I am Midoriya Izuku. She raised her hand and pointed to her reflection defiantly, her body being covered in green sparkles. I have a quirk and I will be a hero, she stated firmly, as if challenging her reflection to tell her otherwise. Hearing no argument, she shared a smile with her reflection, the green sparkles fading away. Pleased with herself, she turned away and set to taking a nice shower. With 2 towels, one around her torso and one around her hair, she slipped back into her room. Glancing at her computer monitor, she froze. Mighty Fan 1. BRB. Explosion King is online. Explosion King. You better get back soon, nerd. She rushed over to her computer despite her state of dress. Mighty Fan 1. I'm back, sorry. Explosion King. So what is it? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? She looked at her keyboard, unsure how to reply. Hey, I got turned into a girl by a magic cat from another world, and now I have a quirk. Crazy summer, right? She shook her head. There was no way he'd take anything of the sort seriously. Explosion King. Out with it, Deku. Swallowing, she brought her shaky hands to keyboard. Mighty Fan 1. I have something I need to tell you, but it has to be in person. Mighty Fan 1. Are you free anytime soon? Explosion King is typing. Izuku's hands hovered over the keyboard, waiting for a reply. Explosion King. I guess, my mom is dragging me somewhere stupid tomorrow, but I should be free Wednesday. Explosion King. You better not still be effing sick? Mighty Fan 1. No, I'm better. I'm like a whole new per. She immediately deleted what she was going to say and started over. Mighty Fan 1. I'm fine now. Mighty Fan 1. Meet me in the park, in the hidden area we used to go to past the fallen log. Explosion King. Really? The Explosion King. Fine, but this better be good Deku. Izuku stared at the keyboard for a moment before sighing and simply logging out. She leaned back in her chair looking up to the ceiling. Was this really a good idea? Probably not. But she had to. If she was really going to stop going to school and move away, this could be the last chance the two of them could see each other. Were they even friends anymore? It didn't matter. This was something she had to do. Come kiddo, get dressed, otherwise we're gonna leave you behind. Her father's voice carried all the way from the living room, muffled somewhat. Just a minute, she called back and set aside her towel to start getting dressed. The meet-up with Bakugo hanging in the back of her mind, but she'd just have to tackle the meeting in a few days when Wednesday rolled around, that for better or worse. It was early morning on Wednesday when Izuku got her things together. She had barely been able to sleep the night before as she tried to work out the best way to explain things to Katsuki. In the end, her only conclusion was just explain it all and see what happens. She debated putting one of her few feminine outfits to help her story, but immediately shot it down. She's barely been able to wear them in front of her mother. The mere thought of walking all the way to the park and then Bakugo left her cheeks crimson and head light. After dressing in a regular t-shirt, she quickly hopped onto her computer and typed up a quick message. Mighty Fan 1. Heading out now, I'll be waiting. She debated writing more or deleting it entirely, but she left it be. Katsuki had always been an early riser, so no doubt he'd see it before too long. Time would tell whether this was a good idea. After a moment to put on a poker face, she rushed out into the living room. With only word that she was heading out for a bit, she continued on past to the door. Her mother only had the chance to offer a puzzled goodbye, Aylward watching with a curious expression. At the front of the apartment building, she took a moment to settle her heart. Should she have told her parents what she was doing? Probably. But she was committed now. At least that's what she was telling herself. Still shaking from nerves and anxiety, she made her way to the park. It was warm, but not overly so, as the sun had yet to reach its apex. The foot traffic was light, even less so once she made it to the park proper. Ignoring the other morning joggers, she turned off the main path to a forested area near the southern edge of the park. She paused at the worn-down metal fence marked with "No Trespassing," ducking through the hole and following along the path. 5 years. It had been nearly 5 years since she'd walked along this path. This used to be the place they would hang out nearly every day, playing hero and catching bugs. She paused at the log that crossed a small stream. She smiled slightly, picturing the many times they'd passed by the spot. Kakin. She remembered the day he fell and she tried to help him out of the stream. How angry he'd gotten for some reason before he pushed her down into the water and stalked off with his friends. It was one of the last times she'd come here. She walked down to the stream and couched down, touching the flowing water. It held a strong chill despite the summer days due to all the tree cover. Her reflection had changed over these few weeks. The more obvious differences were still hidden under her t-shirt and shorts. She could always see it, every time she looked. Hopefully Dr. Matta might be able to help with that. Her first session wouldn't be until the Sunday. The stress of the approaching school year now no longer an issue, she was able to look forward to dealing with these small issues instead. Hopefully I'll have something nice to say to Miss-san about today, she mused as she turned her gaze up toward the trees above. Loud, confident footsteps broke her from her musings. Anxiety grew despite her best efforts to push it down. The telltale creak of someone pushing open the tear in the fence gave her all she needed to know that he was actually here. She stood and brushed herself off, more out of nerves than actually needing to. By the time she climbed back up to the walking path, she saw him in his own t-shirt and shorts, hands in his pockets as he glared at her. Hey Kakin. This better be good Deku, he greeted coarsely. And I thought you said you weren't even sick anymore. I'm not. I never was, she admitted softly, only getting a confused frown in response. What is that supposed to mean? It's a long story. Do you want to talk here? Or go all the way up to the clearing? Here's fine, I don't have all day, he shot back irritably, Guess he wasn't feeling the same nostalgia she was. That was fine. Okay, she took a shaky breath. I'm going to start. All I ask is that you don't interrupt until I'm done. She caught flicker of something in his eyes, but the sour expression barely shifted. He scoffed and turned his head. Whatever, just talk. So she did. She explained the package from her father. Elward's awakening and her first change. The original role of the Guardians and unlocking her quirk. She was impressed she got that far before he finally spoke up. That is the dumbest sheet I've ever heard. It's a lot, yeah, she offered with a sigh, holding off on the rest of her story as he seemed already at his limit. You don't believe me, do you? She frowned as his eyes narrowed. Of course not, he growled crossly. I can't believe you dragged me all the way out here to feed me this bullshit. He turned to leave. So you got a quirk, now huh? It sounds just as useless as what you would get. You couldn't even make up something cool? Even in your own imagination you're compared to me. Really? Was that all he got out of that? Disappointment warred with frustration as she clenched her fists tightly. I can transform, she said before she really noticed. She hadn't intended to show off the divine vestments, but his complete dismissal of everything starting a burning feeling inside her. He wouldn't even let her finish telling him what was actually happening. It cut deeply. Her statement seemed to give him pause, and he glanced over his shoulder. You're really going in on this, aren't you? He muttered, clearly bored now. She didn't trust herself to say anything else, so she decided just to do it. Pulling up her sleeve, she revealed a simple bracelet with a small gem. She closed her eyes and the small gem flared up with green light. Pretty guardian. Transform. She erupted in green light as she called forth her divine vestments, feeling the familiar rush of power. She normally ignored the rush, more annoyed to change than anything. But right now she grasped onto that strength. Merging it with her own frustration pushed away all anxiety, leaving her with a new feeling. A confidence she couldn't remember feeling in that past. When she opened her eyes again she was focused, glaring at the boy who had once been her closet friend. He looked legitimately shocked as he looked back at her. Deku, you're wearing a FNG skirt. What are? You're really a girl, he trailed off. What the F dashed, he whispered, trying to collect himself, a little red in the face. There was something satisfying that reaction, but right now she had something else to prove. Hit me. What? I said hit me, she said firmly, caught up in this rush of emotions. You think my quirk is so useless? Her eyes narrowed. The challenge seemed to snap him out of his funk. A familiar scowl returned to his face, but instead of fear it invoked anticipation. You lost it, Deku? A small staccato of explosions flickered across his palm. You could barely take a hit before, and besides you're a girl now. He stumbled over the statement a bit as it was still such an unreal concept for the boy to consider. Izuku couldn't help a small smirk. Then prove it, Kaken. She covered her body in green sparkles, the guardian transformation reducing the usual drain of full body usage far more than it normally did. Unless you're afraid of being beaten by a girl, she teased lightly. She wasn't sure where all this attitude was coming from, but it was intoxicating. Fine, if you want a beating. Katsuki growled, clenching his fist and marching forward. He wasn't using his quirk, not yet at least. Sometimes being underestimated was nice. She made no move to dodge or block as he swung in and struck her right in the face, only reflexively closing her eyes before the hit. The sparkling girl was unmoved, the boy's fist stopping abruptly as if he'd punched a wall. What the dash? Is that all, Kaken? She reached up and grabbed the boy's arm, pulling it slowly away from her face, enjoying the expression of panic as he struggled to break her grip. Frilly as it was, the uniform had some amazing properties. It was designed as armor for battling the dark forces, efficiently channeling her mana to not only boost her defenses but also strength. The use of her reinforcement was wholly unnecessary as the vestments would easily protect her from a punch from a normal 10-year-old, even one as athletic as Bakugo. Her strength wasn't boosted all that much, but for the first time she was in a position of strength against the bully. Concern and confusion spread across his face as he struggled to break her iron grip on his arm. Let go, damn it, he growled, opening his other hand and blasting her in the chest, putting a more force into it than he likely would have normally when he was trying to be intimidating. She let go. Though the force did knock her back a few steps, aside from a small bit of heat, she was once again unscathed. With her reinforcement quirk layered over her vestments, it made a shield that even the explosion couldn't pierce. She couldn't help but laugh. She'd never felt this good. This in control went around Katsuki. "What the hell are you?" The blonde muttered, cautiously rubbing his sore wrist, edging slowly away from the magically enhanced girl. "A hero," she said firmly, her eyes burning with conviction. She took a step toward him, despite being born quirkless. "Being put down by you and the others." "Single day." She stalked closer as the boy began to back faster, his hands crackling with small explosions as he prepared to defend himself. "I'm finally going to become a hero." She clenched her fists and ran right at him. For all the wonderful buffs, it did little to change the fact that Izuku had no actually fighting experience. Katsuki dodged her first 2 sloppy haymakers, though his counterpunch was shrugged off entirely. Even a couple of open-palmed explosions only pushed her back, delaying her sloppy onslaught. "All right, you asked for it, nerd." Having no other option, Bakugo gathered his hands together in front of him and let out a large explosion that pushed all the branches and bushes away with the force, singeing away all the grass beneath him. He cursed softly, wincing at the recoil in his arms. His legs were shaky, having nearly buckled underneath him from the force of his own blast. Hope that wasn't too much. He frowned, trying to see past the smoke of his own explosion when Izuku came diving through it. She tackled him, pinning his arms to the ground with enough strength the boy couldn't lift them. Her face and torso were singed, her sparkles gone. The blast had been strong enough to break through her defense, but it had been blunted significantly. She loomed over him as he struggled, a manic smile on her lips. "Get off me, you crazy beach. What the hell do you want? Admit it." She tightened her grip on the boy's arms. He hissed softly, arms still sore from pushing his quirk too far. "Admit I'm not useless." She leaned in, glaring at him eye to eye. "Admit I can be a hero." "That's enough," a male voice commanded. In sudden snap, the divine vestments dissipated in a shower of sparkles. Izuku fell fully on top of Katsuki when hit with the wave of weakness. She shook her head, trying to clear the fog in her mind. Kaken? Why was she on top of him? When had they even fallen? The scale had shifted back and Katsuki easily pushed her aside, scrambling away. She reached a hand up toward him, seeing the clear fear and anger raging in his eyes. "Wait, No, you stay the hell away from me." The blonde growled as he got up to his feet. "Dragging me out in the woods to rub in this new power like you're better than me." He narrowed his eyes. "You'll always be Deku, no matter what kind of cheat power you get." "Got it," he growled before turning and stalking away. "No, she called out weakly, but he didn't even look back. "Kaken." She grabbed her head in her hands. What had come over her? She had just wanted to tell him what was going on. Why she wouldn't be going to school. That she was moving away. Why? Magic is powered by emotions. Sensei? Izuku looked to the keeper shakily. Elward spoke calmly as he walked out from behind a bush, stopping next to the distraught girl. Part of a guardian's training is learning how to assess that emotion alongside their magic. He said softly in an understanding tone. "You're an emotionally driven person, Izuku. Mixed with your work ethic, it's no surprise why magic has come so easily to you in our training, but that can be a bane as well as a boon." "You knew that would happen?" "I suspected it might," he admitted with a sad smile. "Your aura was in such turmoil this morning, I grew concerned. When I felt the power of hope flare with such a burning anger, I knew I had to find you as soon as I could." "I see." She curled up against a tree, tucking her legs under her chin. The otherworldly cat trotted over and took a seat at her side. "Part of my training will be helping you with controlling your emotions so you won't lose control in battle in the future." "But it won't. Help take back what I did to Kaken." "No, it won't." "Isn't there some kind of magic to make him forget?" she asked hopefully as she hugged her legs tighter. "Not in the kind of magic I am proficient with," Elward replied with a sigh. His ears flickered toward her as he heard the girl sniffle softly. Leaning against her leg, he closed his eyes. I'm sorry, Izuku. The keeper of hope sat with his charge as she softly cried, the summer breeze shifting the leaves above them. It was nearing noon when Izuku returned to her apartment, Elward carried in her arms so she could hold him close. The cat-like being opened the door with a flick of telekinesis and she walked in without saying a word. Sensing the need for proper emotional support, Aylward slipped out of the girl's arms and padded further into the apartment while the girl mechanically removed her shoes and walked to her room. Lady Midoriya? Hisashi looked up from a book, noting the serious look on the feline. She had to go out and run a few errands. I see. What's wrong? He closed his book and set it aside. Did something happen with Izuku? Indeed, he said with a sigh. I did what little I could, but I believe she needs a parent right now. He made an uncomfortable expression. Inko was always much better at this kind of thing. But he couldn't sit back and do nothing. I'll see what I can do then. Thank you, my lord, he said with a small bow. Hisashi stood and headed down the hallway. Izuku's door was closed. There was some muffled talking. Likely some kind of video or music. He knocked on the door and waited. There was no response. Hey kiddo, mind if I come in? He called out, waiting for any kind of reply. The muffled talking stopped, and after a long moment he finally heard a soft, okay. It was something at least. He opened the door to see his daughter sitting on the edge of her bed, the room dark save the light of her computer monitor. Her eyes were red, she'd clearly been crying. On her computer was a paused video of All Might rescuing people from some calamity. It was probably that video, the one Inko had told him about. It was a video Izuku loved to watch, particularly after a rough day. He closed the door behind him and took a seat next to her. She offered nothing. It was going to be up to him to get to the bottom of things. So, do you want to tell me what happened? He saw his daughter flinch slightly, but she continued to look down. After a long moment of silence, she finally replied. Me and Kakin got into a fight, she admitted softly. Did you win? He joked good-naturedly, only to see her cringe and look away, her little fists clenched tightly in her lap. Well, seems she stepped right in that one. He prepared to start again when she spoke up, voice cracking a little. I used the divine vestments against him, she whispered shamefully. Hisashi wasn't 100% up on the details, but from he understood hoes were designed for warfare against demons. Understandably, that could be dangerous to use against a kid. I see. He took a breath and placed an arm around her shoulder, feeling her tense up. After a moment she relaxed and leaned against him. Did you hurt him? He asked calmly with no judgment. He felt her shake her head, but she didn't vocalize the response. That a girl? I nearly did, she admitted softly. I was stronger than him. He couldn't stop me. The words tumbled out of her mouth as she leaned closer, gripping his shirt. It felt so good. Sensei said the transformation amplified my emotions. She fell silent for a moment, but Clear had more to say, so he waited patiently for her to find her words. Does that mean I wanted to hurt him? She sounded scared. Scared of this other side of her she wasn't fully aware of. I know we're not really friends anymore. Especially now, she trailed off, clearly pained by admitting the fact aloud. How should I put this? There was likely some anger inside you. It's perfectly understandable, wanting to stand up to your bully when you find out you have the advantage. Hisashi brought his hand up and rested it on top of her head. But ultimately you're one of the good ones, Izuku. You're always thinking about others and wanting to help. She could feel her tense up, wanting to dispute him, but he ruffled her hair softly. That being said, you are still young, you are going to make mistakes. It's the only way you can learn how to get better, he said with a smile as she seemed to relax again. You really think so? I know so, he replied with a chuckle. You're a smart kid, you keep training with Al and I'm sure he'll help you control those feelings, he assured her before hugging her close. And you'll have your mom and I here to support you all that way. Promise? She asked in a tiny voice as she hugged him tightly. Promise. Dad. Yeah, kiddo. Thanks. No problem, he said easily, glad she seemed to have calmed down finally. Despite that he could feel her fidget a bit in his arms, was there more? Dad. See, could you? She trailed off into an embarrassed mumble he couldn't decipher. What was that? Called you pet me head again? she spoke quickly, burying her face further into his side. Hisashi blinked for a moment, for he chuckled softly and moved his hand to softly ruffle the girl's head once more. She seemed to relax, the tension in her shoulders easing up. He kept still and allowed her to continue to lean against him, her vice-like grip loosening as the stress melted away. "That I missed you, Dad," she whispered, snuggling closer. "I know, kiddo," he replied with a small, sad smile as he continued to run his hands through her hair. "I missed you too." Her breathing slowed until she finally passed out. He brushed away the hair from her face and watched her sleep, no longer afraid or full of doubt. She'd been through so much in such a short time. It was only going to get harder from here. He carefully shifted the girl until she was laying on the bed properly and tucked her in, leaving a light kiss on her forehead. "Good night, Izuku." He shut off her computer and left the room, carefully closing the door behind him. Giving the door one last glance, he headed back to the living room. He was here this time, no hurried calls during a break in work. No long-distance care packages. It was going to be different now. He was going to make sure of it. And that would start with a phone call. It was late in the evening when Izuku woke up in her bed, physically exhausted and stomach growling. Fuzzy memories of the forest confrontations sat at the edge of her mind. For a moment she wondered it had all been some horrible dream. But as the fog cleared, so did her perspective. It had happened. The realization made her want to curl into her blankets and try to go back to sleep. Her stomach refused to be ignored, growling loudly, making it impossible to relax. With a sigh, she slipped out from the covers and to her feet. She glanced at her desktop but decided just to head out, the smell of a home-cooked dinner overpowering her depressed funk. Her mother was making katsudon, her favorite. Dinner was a cozy affair. Her mother fussing over her even more than usual, having heard the details from Aylward and her father. Like both of them, she was fully supportive of her despite the mistakes she'd made and was equally confident she'd be able to overcome them. Despite her initial mindset, by the end of it all, she was able to smile again, if only a small one. Having her parents and sensei all lifting her up. She was truly blessed. She returned to her room in higher spirits, still tired from the roller coaster of emotion and magical drain. She looked to her desktop again, but this time walked over and turned it on once more. Taking a deep breath, she opened her messenger. There had been no new messages since her one left this morning. With great reluctance, she began typing. "Mighty Fan 1. Kaken. Are you on?" She waited, minutes dragged on with no reply. He normally was on this time of night, even though the program said he was offline. That meant he could just be on invisible, or he just hadn't bothered loading up his computer. At least for now, he hadn't blocked her. For now. "Mighty Fan 1. I'm sorry about what I did in the forest. I completely lost control of myself. I still have a long way to go in my training. Mighty Fan 1. But that's beside the point. Mighty Fan 1. I had wanted to tell you that I won't be returning to school." She paused briefly, already knowing what she was going to type but not looking forward to doing so. "Mighty Fan 1. Because of all the changes, I can't just go to school like nothing's changed. I'm a girl now, and well, that's going to weird everyone out. It weirds me out too sometimes." She had started to ramble on about the strangeness but deleted back down. That wasn't important to what she was trying to say right now. And more than likely he probably didn't care if he was going to read this at all. Briefly clenching her fists and relaxed again and went back to delivering her message. "Mighty Fan 1. So we're going to be moving away and starting over. I don't know where yet, but I'll let you know as soon as I do. Mighty Fan 1. Even though you probably don't want to see me again." She nearly deleted that line but couldn't bring herself to do so. "Mighty Fan 1. I know we haven't been close for a long time. But I just wanted to say, I've always admired you. Despite everything you've said to me. Mighty Fan 1. I just wanted you to know that. Mighty Fan 1. Good night, Kaken." She leaned back and looked at everything she wrote before slowly logging back off and going back to bed. Emotions swirling in her chest, wondering if this was what it was like to lose a friend. As promised, her father had somehow managed to talk the school into agreeing to her homeschooling for the second semester. Apparently he got Dr. Matu to assist in a convincing enough half-truth that they acquiesced to the arrangement. The last week of vacation magic lessons were put on hold as Aylward hunkered down with all the study materials, spending all day and night to memorize all the relevant material, absorbing and processing it all, before putting together a full curriculum. The family spent this time going out and having a last bit of fun, before putting the troubles of summer behind them. Once the school year started, it took a couple of weeks or so for the routine to set in. After sharing breakfast as a family, they would split up. Elward would take Izuku aside and begin his lessons. Izuku would shift into the divine vestments and remain as such for the rest of the lessons. This had been Inko's idea, getting her daughter more used to the kind of uniform she'd likely have to wear once she re-entered school. It also did an excellent job of forcing her to confront the emotional amplifying it could cause and work to control it. Izuku was less than thrilled but complied. The first lesson was magic quirk training. It was easily the subject that had her most engaged, so starting the day got her motivated. From there it moved on to math, Japanese, and English. Math was an essential part of many magical disciplines, so the lessons were unorthodox compared to the ones she had been used to, but still helped her learn what she needed. The otherworldly cat, being naturally gifted in language, pushed Izuku to learn much more than her previous teachers had ever bothered to. Admittedly, in the past she had only made any effort to learn due to All Might's own connection with America. She learned to dread this part of the day, but despite it all she did learn. After that was lunch and a short break. She was allowed to dismiss the vestments and eat in peace. Her mother would often use this time to check on her well-being. They returned to lessons with physical education. It began with extensive stretches. Elward put particular notice on Izuku's flexibility, as due to the nature of reinforcement it would limit the user's agility when used on oneself. Once the girl was sufficiently limbered up, they would go out for a jog. The neighbors had given some odd looks the first few times, but before long they grew used to seeing the young girl jogging alongside her odd-looking cat. The jog usually ended in the secluded grove of the park where she'd met with Katsuki. Elward always had some manner of game, more in line with guardian training rather than general phys ed. She would need to enhance herself with reinforcement to dodge, block, or navigate her sensei's challenge for the day. If she failed to do so, it would repeat the next day until she surpassed it. With that energy release, they would return home and relax with more traditional lessons. That also meant the return of the divine vestments. Social studies and science were just as she remembered them from her normal schooling, though having the teacher's undivided attention allowed her to get any extra answers or insights she'd normally be confused by. The afternoon would end with meditation, refocusing her magic and focusing on self-control exercises. After that, she was free to spend her time as she liked. Lacking any other social life, it was usual spent catching back up with the various heroic happenings of the day, noting new heroes' debuts and analyzing their quirks. Hisashi came back in the evenings, spending the time before dinner to discuss things with Elward, slowly documenting the world the keeper originally came from. It was one of several projects her father was working on in regards to the outsider, slowly forming a team of like-minded individuals. Dinner was a shared experience, one for the four of them to unwind and enjoy a meal together. They separated once more, Inko and Hisashi spending the evening together while Elward went back to whatever his latest book was and Izuku back to her room, only to come back around the next day all over again. The only different day was Sundays. Elward would leave in the morning alongside Hisashi for further study on the scientific end of things, studying magic and the power within of the hope of Devaria. Izuku would spend these off days with his mother, going out and doing various things around town. In the afternoon they would head downtown and Izuku would have her weekly session with Dr. Met. She would speak candidly with the empath about her feelings and her past, leaving every session with a lighter heart and clearer picture of herself. It continued along into fall, lessons adjusting over time. The general education continued as prepared, progressing steadily. Her quirk grew as she worked, making up for the years of powerlessness with a drive that only continued to impress the keeper. The physical training evolved from games to proper strength and flexibility training. Elward had picked up from studying a book on the training regimes of gymnasts, regarding their overall fitness and flexibility as ideal for Izuku's further growth as a user of reinforcement. Lacking most of the proper equipment, he used magic to make temporary constructs when a suitable improvisation couldn't be found. Inko also started getting more involved in the day-to-day, After going through her own spiritual journey, she found her magic source and began to work alongside her daughter in the daily lessons. She didn't have the full access to her power due to her age and lack of connection to the hope, but it had improved her simple telekinesis quirk into a more versatile power she could use in her daily life. No longer simply pulling small objects toward her, she was given full control. It was early November when things changed. They'd found a house, a proper house, in the Nabu ward of Yokohama, a oceanside property a few hours north. It was a bit of a fixer-upper, but as ever Hisashi seemed to know the right people to help fix it up enough to make it through the winter months. It was still a short train ride away from Yuzudafu, so Izuku could still have her weekly sessions with Dr. Meadow, and Hisashi could meet up with his collaborators to continue their research and study. Once the renovations were done, it was just the packing and they could be fully moved in before Christmas. Izuku hadn't spoken with Bakugo since that day back at the end of summer, despite that she still sent the boy a message with the news. She was disappointed but not surprised when she received no reply yet again, even if she remained unblocked. As moving day approached, lessons were shortened so the family could begin packing and finalizing all the changed paperwork that would be needed to reintroduce her into society. Those final papers coming with even further changes. Changes that would make a true step forward toward a new future and a fresh start. Returning from winter break was never an easy prospect for a child. It was the shortest of the holiday breaks, though it was at least balanced out in that offered a chance for gifts and New Year's cash. The prospect of having to get back into uniform and waste all day in class again was a drag to most. Jiro Kyoka was one such girl. She sat at her desk, head propped up lazily on one arm. She ignored the din of her classmates' chatter, as much as her quirk would allow her to at least. It wasn't that she was antisocial exactly, but she did put off an intimidating presence compared to most of the other girls. Her punk accessories and reserved attitude made many people think she was a delinquent despite her grades. She just never bothered to correct them. As everyone talked and exchanged gossip, all she wanted to do was go back home and practice more on the guitar her father had gotten her. The thought alone bringing the shadow of a smile to the girl's face. "Attention everyone. Take your seats." The teacher's voice carried over the collective chatter of the students. The teacher's words reluctantly getting the various friend groups to break up, and they slowly returned to their assigned seating. When the room finally calmed down, the teacher began speaking again. "Now, I know everyone is excited to be back from holiday," he said with a note of sarcasm, smiling a bit at the groan that followed. "But we do have some important news. We have a new student that has moved here for the last semester." This announcement injected some energy into the room. Even Kyoka perked up a bit. It was a rare thing for so late in the school year. The students began whispering among themselves on what kind of person the new student could be. The teacher motioned for quiet once more. Once relative order returned, the teacher motioned to the open door. After a long pause, a girl shuffled into the room. She had longish green hair that nearly touched her shoulders. She wore the usual winter school uniform, but her skirt was on the longer side, much closer to regulation than most girls tended to wear theirs. Her hands were crossed in front of her, clutching the handle of her book bag tightly. As she turned to face the class, looking out to the sea of expecting faces before reddening and looking down. Hello. My name is Midoriya Izumi. My quirk is reinforcement. It reinforces things. I like studying quirks, and it's nice to meet you all. She squeaked out awkwardly with a stiff bow. What a dork. So lame. She's kinda cute, little plain though. She's shaking like a leaf. Poor girl. At least it's not a dude. Heh, looks like she'll be an easy target. I wonder if she'll be useful? Kyoka shook her head, her jacks easily picking up all of her classmates' mutterings. She didn't like eavesdropping on everyone, but it was just something she had to get used to due to her quirk. The way she saw things, as long as she didn't abuse it, most of them seemed to forget how good her hearing was. She passed a glance to another girl in the far. A stylish brunette who was smirking to herself. Kyoka knew that smirk, and it could only mean trouble for the new girl. The girl's face changed to one of total innocence as she raised her. "There's an open seat next to me, sensei." The girl's voice was chipper and attentive, easily cutting through the murmurs of her classmates. The teacher adjusted his glasses and allowed a small smile. "Ah yes, of course," He turned a friendly smile to the nervous wreck of a transfer student and placed a hand on her shoulder, motioning toward the back. "Please, Midoriya-san, take a seat next to Tano-san," he said, kindly, getting a small nod out of the girl as she shuffled past the rest of the class to take a seat. "Hi, name's Tano-run," the brunette offered softly with a smile. "If there's anything you need to know and need any help getting around, don't be afraid to ask." The saccharine sweet tone brought a snort and roll of the eyes from Jairu, trying to tune the whole exchange out after the new girl's nervous reply. Tano-run was from a rich family, coupled with an amazing quirk that let her walk on air. She kept a well-crafted persona in front of the faculty, but was often talking low of her classmates. Not that it really mattered, as far as the school could say she could do no wrong. Tano had been in her class since first grade. Kyoka never got on with the girl. In the end, it really wasn't any of her business. It would just be troublesome to get involved. Despite her desire, school was generally a dull experience, and she often found her attention wandering invariably back to the new girl. She was a strange one. Though she jittered like a leaf and was not able to utter a full sentence much of the time, she was quite smart and athletic. She apparently spent much of her time outside of school preparing to become a hero. That dedication was impressive considering they hadn't even reached middle school. Though Kyoka's first love was music, she was not above the fantasy of going into heroism as a career, like most kids did. Realistically, though, she was unsure if she had a quirk that would cut it. Something about the girl's fascination with heroes was infectious, even for just overhearing it in passing. Tano herself feigned interest in the girl's ramblings, playing the long game, seeing if Midoriya would fit into her little clique. It seemed obvious to Kyoka where this was going to go, though. The green-haired girl's earnest efforts may have jived well with Tano's pleasant front, but not her true self. It was just a matter of when it would come to a head. Turns out that would be 3 weeks into the semester. "I'll help you cheat, Run-san." Kyoka caught a murmur of Midoriya's voice as she was leaving for the day, just before she could set her phone's music player for the walk home. Curiosity getting the better of her, she followed where her jacks led her around to the side of the building. "Come on, Izumi-chan," Tano said with a dramatic sigh. Some light giggles from other girls showed it was more than just the two of them talking. Likely the Kano twins, they always seemed to be at the popular girl's heels. "It's just a test, you're right next to me, it won't even be hard." "It's wrong," she replied firmly. "I don't mind helping you study, but that's as far as it goes. After all the nice things I did." Tano sighed dramatically. "I was doing you a favor since you were new. No one really liked you, so I tried to make them play nice, but if that's how it's going to be, I won't be able to protect you anymore, I suppose." The tone was casual, but there was a clear implication of something. "Protect? What dash?" "You have a good evening, Midoriya-sen," the brunette continued in an icily formal tone. The other two voices were far less refined. "Yeah, bye. Nerd." Kyoka could hear the 3 sets of footsteps walking off in the other direction amidst giggles and soft banter that was less than flattering. She closed her eyes, straining to catch what they were saying. "Odu riddance, I don't know if I could sit through another one of those rambling monologues. Always boring hero stuff, she's such a dork." "Now girls, there's no time for ideal chatter. There are calls to make. Right?" Both twins chimed in before trailing off into giggles. "Calls, huh?" Kyoka muttered softly to herself with a frown. No good was going to come out of that. A little sniffle brought her focus back around the corner. Midoriya was still there. She let out a shaky sigh before talking with herself. "That I can't believe I really thought it would be that easy," she muttered, the bitterness palpable. Kyoka wasn't entirely sure why, but she found herself walking around the corner. Her body moved on its own. She kept her face neutral, reflexively slouching her shoulders and pocketing her hands. The girl looked to be on the edge of tears, looking back at her in surprise. "You okay?" Kyoka asked, unprepared for anything more than that. She'd barely exchanged a handful of words with the girl since she transferred in. Midoriya wiped her face and forced a weak smile. I'm fine, just," she trailed off. "A bit of a fight," she admitted reluctantly as she turned her gaze down. "With Tano, right?" she pressed. It was pretty common knowledge the two had been hanging out, so only received a small nod in return. "It's for the best, that girl is bad news." She allowed her distaste to slip into her tone and got tired chuckle in response. Yeah, the girl lifted her head with a more honest, if sad smile. I kinda figured that out. You gonna be okay? Kyoka repeated. Yeah, she straightened up a little. I'll just work off the frustration when I get home, maybe a little meditation and I'll be okay. Meditation? Really? The rocker girl raised an eyebrow, getting a small blush to rise from the other girl. It's surprisingly relaxing once you get used to it, she defended lightly, before trailing off awkwardly. She lightly scuffed the dirt in front of her with on of her sneakers. Kyoka let up and shrugged. To each their own. When I have a crap day, I usually just crank up the music and zone out, she admitted before looking up thoughtfully. That's not all that different, huh? I guess not. Midoriya agreed with a little giggle. That was better than a sigh, at least, mission accomplished. Well, I really should start heading home. Same. They both headed back to the main path. Thank you, She trailed off for a moment before it seemed to click. Jiro-san, right? You got it, she replied with a little smirk. Well, thank you for checking on me. Do feel a little better. No problem, she shrugged. And with a little wave took their separate ways. Kyoka still wasn't sure why she had gotten herself involved, but the girl's smile seemed to make it worth the effort. There's one good deed for the semester. The next few days were strange. Seemingly overnight, Midoriya had turned into a massive klutz. It started small. Her study materials constantly falling off her desk or somehow missing her chair when she went to sit down. Though it only seemed to be increasing in frequency, going outside of homeroom into other parts of the school. If Kyoka hadn't been unconsciously following the girl the previous weeks, she'd likely not even thought anything strange given her meek and flighty persona. The nervous klutziness seemed so appropriate. But she had been paying attention. Despite appearances, Midoriya was physically adept, moving with grace and coordination, until now. Instinctively she assumed Tano must be doing something, but her airwalk quirk could explain some things, but wouldn't allow such a constant interference when they were separated. Now girls, there's no time for ideal chatter. There are calls to make. Of course, she wasn't working alone. So petty, can't even do her own dirty work. She was very popular amongst the school at large, so it could be hard to pin down who'd be in on it. The green-haired girl who had only started to open up in class was swiftly pulling back and starting to keep to herself, the rest of her classmates seemingly avoiding the girl. It irked Kyoka more than she thought it would. It really wasn't any of her business. But Midoriya didn't do anything to deserve this. Can anyone solve this equation? Kyoka heard distantly and immediately tried to make herself as small as possible. She hadn't been paying any attention up front. If she was called on, Midoriya-chan, please come up. The hearing student gave a soft sigh of relief, having dodged that bullet. Maybe she should get back to focusing on class. Waya-sensei. There was a collage of murmurs and snickers as the girl nervously stood and made her way to the front of the class. Just as she was about to clear of the desks, she seemingly tripped over nothing, flailing forward and falling on her face, body sparking briefly just before impact. A moment after the fall, Kyoka heard the subtle rush of wind before the fallen girl's skirt flared up, flashing the whole class with her all-might panties. The class erupted in laughter which nearly deafened Kyoka, forcing her to focus on blocking out the excess sounds as she usually had to. She watched with a frown as the red-faced girl slowly covered herself and got to her feet, mortified. It took nearly a minute for the teacher to regain control of the class, but Kyoka only focused on Midoriya. The girl's hands were clenched tightly and she looked on the verge of tears. Kyoka clenched her fist. She could not let this stand. As the class broke for lunch, Kyoka headed over to Midoriya's desk, the girl taking her time to gather her things. Her head was down, she looked to be muttering to herself. Yo. She kept her tone casual so not to alert Tano or any of her cronies that something was up. Unfortunately, her words didn't seem to pierce the girl's mutterings. What she had thought was depressed murmurs actually seemed to be intense thought, as if trying to puzzle something out with words. Hey Midoriya, she said with a little bit more force, but still was ignored. Despite her willingness to help, she felt her eye tick slightly in annoyance. Her right jack snaked down and touched the girl's hand. The steady vibration of her heart seemed to short out the other girl's concentration, causing her to look down at her hand in confusion. Ha! Welcome back, she greeted with a note of sarcasm, watching the green-haired girl flush red with embarrassment. Sorry, I just got a little lost in thought. I noticed. She couldn't help the natural snark that left her lips. She caught herself before too long and got back to her original topic. You okay? You took a nasty fall there. Why, I'm fine. The only thing I hurt was my pride, she said with a sigh. I really don't know what's with me today. Kyoka did a quick check. Tano and the twins were gone, no muffled movement outside of what she could see. It seemed like it was safe. She pulled the nearest chair over to the girl's desk and leaned in. I don't know why you're trying to play it off, it's clear to anyone you're being targeted. Kyoka said with a frown. I know, the other girl replied softly. I'm used to it from my old school. It was a nice enough surprise to have a few weeks without it, she added with a smile. It held a sad, resigned feeling to it. Kyoka hated it. You're just going to sit back and take it? Aren't you aiming to be a hero? You should fight back. A hero needs to deal with the negative press as well as the positive, she replied back calmly. If that's their opinion, then I'll just need to work harder to change that. The patient-measured response only seemed to spark anger in her chest. She couldn't really be okay with this, could she? Her hand came down hard on the girl's desk, surprising both of them and drawing a few looks from the few students still in the room. Kyoka looked at her own hand and slowly clenched it, letting out a breath. She was getting too heated over this. Look, Midoriya, this isn't their opinion. She looked the green-haired girl right in the eyes. Tano has set this whole situation up. I overheard Tano and her cronies say they had some calls to make after they left you after school. They probably been spreading rumors or calling in favors to get to you, she whispered harshly, watching the realization dawn on her classmate's face. All of this for telling her no? I told you she was bad news. I guess so. Midoriya closed her eyes and took a deep breath before offering a small, but more genuine smile. Thank you, Jiro-san. At least I have something to go on now. Yeah. She succeeded in what she wanted to do, but now was somewhat at a loss. She'd still rarely talked with the girl after all. She stood up and offered her a nod before making her way back to her own desk. Stomach reminded her she very much still had her own lunch she should be eating. As she sat back down at her own desk once more, she couldn't help but notice the focused expression once more. What was going through her head? What was she planning to do? Should she keep butting her own nose into things? Maybe she had her own things to think on. It was that line of thought that had her waiting just outside the gates at the end of school, music in her ear giving an underlying beat to the students moving past her in groups. She didn't have to wait long for her target to arrive. The green hair and hunched shoulders were more than enough to identify her wayward classmate. Shutting off her music with the touch of a finger, she stepped out and raised a hand. Yo. Jiro-san? The extreme puzzled expression was almost worth the wait on its own. Is there something else you needed to tell me? She asked tentatively with a small note of concern. Nah, not particularly, she admitted with a shrug, further confusing the girl. You got anything planned this afternoon? Me? She suddenly looked nervous. Just some studying and training b-dash. Nothing important, gotcha. She cut her off, having to try her best not to laugh at the shocked expression left on her classmate. How about you come with me today? What? Where? It's a surprise, she said with a mysterious grin. You deserve a little fun after all that crap today. You really don't have t-dash. But I am, so if you're free, let's go. Midoriya did need to confirm it was okay with her mother first, but one call later the girls were on their way into town. Kyoka held a casual stride with her bag over her shoulder, her companion a step behind with her bag clutched tightly in front of her. This would be good for her, she was too tense. Kyoka led her classmate into the town center, carefully navigating through the growing afternoon crowds. They didn't live in a large city, but in the afternoon it tended to get a lot busier. Thus it was important for them to arrive early enough that there'd still be a room open. Karaoke? Midoriya squeaked, freezing up as soon as she saw the sign. Yeah, but don't tell me you've never done karaoke before. Okay, I won't. She muttered, looking down. So sheltered. Good thing we're fixing that today. She grabbed the sulking girl's hand and pulled her inside amidst an avalanche of stuttered protests. An older girl in her late teens sat at the front desk looking bored out of her mind. On spotting the two girls, she cracked a smile. "Well, if it isn't Kyoka-chan. Not flying solo today?" She spoke with a bemused drawl. "Nope, decided to bring a friend today," she replied casual, hearing a sharp intake of breath behind her. "There a small room? Let's see." She scanned a finger over the diagram on her desk. "Why don't you ladies head over to room 8 and we'll have a server come by in a few minutes if you want anything. I'm sure you know the way." "Sure thing, thank you." Kyoka led Midoriya down the hallway to the left, letting go once they got into the room. Midoriya remained by the doorway. She had a complicated expression on her face. "Something wrong? You said we were friends." And she had said that. It had just kinda slipped out without her thinking. "Well, I mean we barely know each other at all. We can change that," Kyoka found herself saying while the other girls stared at her. She could feel her own cheeks heating up at the scrutiny. "You don't have to make this weird. You seem like a cool person and, well no, you're really much more of a nerd. But whatever, the details don't matter." She picked up the catalog. "Let's just pick some songs and vent out that shitty day." Her tone somewhat exasperated and her cheeks definitely still rosy. She watched as the other girl's expression softened from one of wonder to a gentle smile, tears glistening in her eyes. She was actually starting to cry. She seemed to collect herself enough, wiping her eyes and smiling even brighter. It made the initial awkwardness all the more worth it. Right. Midoriya was a musical novice to be sure, not knowing most of the songs and having a lot of trouble getting a grasp of a song's rhythm, expounded by her natural self-consciousness for messing up the song. Despite all that, she had a nice voice. Something that became more and more prevalent as she started to worry about it less. She was also quick to give praise for Koika's own performances, which was somehow more embarrassing than singing with her family, but it was a nice gesture. After all, she knew better than anyone she had a lower voice than most girls. The two continued late into the afternoon, taking turns with songs and snacks. By the end of the session, Midoriya looked much more relaxed. Overall, mission accomplished. "Thank you so much, Jiro-san, that was a lot of fun," the green-haired girl said brightly. "What did I say about being so proper?" Kyoka said, somewhat exasperated. "Right, I'm sorry. Jiro-chan," she muttered, somewhat embarrassed. "Sakai," she gained a small smirk. "It's nice to see you smiling rather than grimacing," she pocketed her hands. "If you ever need another vent session, don't be afraid to hit me up. You've got my number, right?" Oh yes," she scrambled to pull out her phone. "I made sure to take it down." She trailed off for a bit before speaking again in a softer tone. "I can talk to you about other things, right? Well, long as you're not gonna spam me with memes or something. I don't mind chatting." "Great. That's cool." She tried to dial back her excitement and sound more casual but failed. "So, see you at school." "Yeah. You okay walking back?" "I'll be fine," the green-haired girl said with confidence. "I need to make up for missing my afternoon training anyway." And with a wave the girl jogged off into the fading light. Kyoka waited by the entrance of the karaoke parlor and checked her phone. Her mom was going to arrive in a few minutes. That was enough time for a tune. She paused on her contacts, noticing Izumi's name nestled among the rest. She recalled the other girl's phone. Contacts barren save for her parents and a doctor. When pushed, she just said she hadn't been very popular, but there was likely more to it. She really was an odd girl. Oh well, it wasn't like she wouldn't have time to find out. Shelving the idea for now, she moved over to her MP3s and set a sound to play, getting lost in the music while she waited for her ride home. Over the next couple of weeks, the girl grew closer together. Izumi Midoriya was a reliable friend to have in class, always ready to help and prepared for every test. Study sessions became regular and soon the families were getting to know each other as well. The Midoriyas were an odd bunch. Izumi's father was laid back and jokey, the emotional calm center to the household. He apparently used to work in anthropology and traveled the world before he got some local work at a research facility nearby on some really hush-hush project. The mother, on the other hand, seemed like your average housewife, a similar nervous disposition like her daughter. and similarly seemed much stronger than she appeared despite her own words. The family also owned a very patient, if oddly colored cat which Izumi had tried to hide at first but eventually gave up. Izumi also had a mysterious tutor that she worked with for classwork and hero work. Somehow Kyoka never managed to run into him, but the family had nothing but praise whenever they came up. By the end of the school year both girls and their families were quite close, and it wasn't uncommon for girls to be staying over at the others on any odd weekend. Speaking of school, the pranks and bullying wore down as it grew old for most. Those that continued eventually got in trouble with the school when the green-haired girl's mother got involved. Izumi had underplayed her bullying problem at her old school apparently because her mother came at the problem like a force of nature, seemingly determined to keep it from happening again. Tano would occasionally throw shade or snippy comment, but eventually everyone moved on. The last semester of elementary school was hardly worth noteworthy, a footnote in everyone's lives. Except for two newly formed friends. Where Kyoka helped nurture Izumi's appreciation for music, she helped Kyoka gain a greater understanding about heroics. About the good that can be done, and how her quirk could be used to help people. Izumi made heroes exciting again, her endless enthusiasm for the topic and dedication was inspiring. When Izuka said it seemed like it could really happen. Though in return her future as a musician seemed so much more cloudy, adding extra guilt whenever her father praised her efforts. She would need to choose between music and heroism for what she really wanted to do. The looming decision haunting her through graduation into the following break, middle school just on the horizon. How could she choose? Or did she have to? It took some digging, but there were a surprising amount of artists who moonlighted as heroes or vice versa. It wasn't an easy path to follow and brought criticism to one's commitment, but her friend assured her support in following that goal. Something her father echoed a week later. This was her starting line. Years passed. Middle school was one of the greatest times in Izumi's life. Her social skills were still lacking, but she now had a true friend to help her navigate the difficult waters. Slowly she was able to make connections. Helping a classmate study for a difficult test, chiming in on local hero gossip, or even a simple kind word towards someone with a difficult quirk. She'd even join the gymnastic team at the urging of Ali Ward as it would help further her flexibility. She was hardly popular and her nerdier habits still drew some teasing, but overall she was normal. Just another girl in school. Well, one who used to be a boy anyway. That fact alone carried more than a few moments of awkwardness, but nothing that couldn't be explained away as being shy. It was strange around boys and girls at first, but even that got easier with time. Dr. Mata always said she wasn't a different person, in hope of reassuring her that the changes she felt were natural to her new self. But she was a different person. Izumi had friends, she had a quirk, she had hobbies and talents outside of observing heroes. She had both parents with her every day and a very attentive trainer who was helping her reach her dream. Being Izumi was easier than being Izuku had ever been. She never told Dr. Matu about those feelings. Before long, the next great step came in her final year of middle school. The exam that would change her life. "You're sure you have everything, sweetie?" Inko wrung her hands together as her daughter slipped her shoes on. "I'm sure, Mom." Izumi tried to keep the exasperation out of her voice, but wasn't entirely successful. Her mom meant well, but one could only answer the same questions so many times. Her backpack held all her supplies for both the written and practical exam. Notebooks for both testing and quirk watching, a UA exam no doubt bringing out all manners of quirk users. She even packed away a track suit for a physical exam, but still found herself dressing in her junior high uniform. Maybe it was all the training she'd been doing with Aylward in preparation, but she'd gotten comfortable moving around in a skirt. She wasn't sure yet if that was a good thing or a bad one. "Okay." Her mother sighed, trying to expel all her nervous energy. "Sure you don't want a ride to campus?" Her father called from the living room, head peeking just around the wall. She shook her head and offered a small smile. "Thanks, but I'll be okay. I'm going to take the train in with Kyo-chan." "Okay, kiddo. Well, you knock him dead out there. Right. Remember your training." Ali Ward spoke up, seated just at the edge of the entryway. His tail curled around his paws. "With your mind focused, there's nothing they can throw at you that you cannot overcome." "Yes, sensei," she replied with a firm nod. Izumi felt a light touch on her cheek, bringing her attention back to her mother. Inko tucked a stray hair behind her daughter's ear, smiling and a little teary-eyed. "You've grown so much in so little time." She smiled a little wider as Izumi blushed. "You say that, but I've barely grown at all since the change." Both women giggled. The elder Midoriya pulled her daughter in close. "I'm proud of you, Izumi," she whispered softly. "Even with everything that has happened, you've adapted to it all so wonderfully. Do your best, we'll be rooting for you." Izumi, getting a little misty-eyed herself, nodded, giving her mother a tight squeeze. Inko stepped back and just took into the image of her daughter. She'd grown her hair out, the wavy green now falling just past her shoulders, held back with a couple of hair clips. Her body toned from regular exercise, subtle curves showing the woman she was swiftly becoming. Izumi straightened the straps on her backpack and strode confidently into the sunlight. "I'm off." Izumi kept a steady jog from her house, focusing all her nervous energy into forward momentum. Her mind was buzzing with possible exam hurdles. Creeping doubts were swiftly followed surges of determination. The cycle continued on for the rest of her jog until the sight of the train station, where she set the introspection aside. "Aizu, what kept you?" Jairu's casual drawl caught the green-haired girl's ear just before she spotted her friend through the crowd. She had eschewed wearing her uniform for a more casual outfit aimed for physical testing. "The train will be here any minute." "Sorry, my mom held me up on the way out." She scratched the back of her head, memory of her mother's sincere praise bringing a light flush of red to her cheeks. "It's all good." Jairu shrugged and smirked a bit. "So today's the day, huh? Hard to believe we're really heading to UA today. Surreal stuff." "Yeah, I know." A nervous giggle escaped Izumi's mouth. "I was up late last night looking into potential exams and possible scenarios. I mean, I'm sure the written exam won't be a walk in the park either, but the sheer range of possibilities for hero testing is immense." She could feel her words getting away from her, shoulders tensing as she trailed off into stream of conscious muttering. An arm around her shoulder calmed her down and brought her back to reality again. She glanced to Jairu, cheeks rosy. Sorry. I was doing it again, wasn't I?" "Yeah, you were starting to short out again." She gave the girl's shoulder a squeeze. "Just relax, girl, you got this." She spoke with her usual easy confidence. "No point in frying your brain before the test begins. Right? Yes, Kayakin." Jairu released the girl with a hearty pat on the back. The overhead speakers pinged brightly, signaling the train's arrival, the waiting crowd gathering to the front of the platform as it pulled up. The musician started her way onto the half-packed train and motioned for Izumi to follow. The green-haired girl couldn't help but smile as she followed a step behind. It wasn't hard to find UA. The closer they got to the campus, the more students and examies began to fill the train cars. Jairu kept up small talk to keep Izumi's mind off the upcoming test. Before they knew it, the stop had come and all the students began to file off the train. The campus itself only a short walk from the station, its sheer size and majesty making it visible long before they even saw the entrance. Kyoka whistled lightly as they passed under the ornate gates. "So this is what a fancy school looks like." Her tone held its usual monotone, but she was tense, her jacks twitching slightly. "This is really it." Izumi could feel all the emotions rushing into her at once. The highs and lows that led her here. She gripped her straps tightly as she stared up at the main building. All Might's alma mater, UA Academy. The spell was broken as someone roughly bumped her shoulder passing by. Jairu caught her before she stumbled too far off balance. "Watch it, a-hole." Something about that voice made Izumi freeze. "Keich, I don't move aside for extras." The voice blew off Kyoka's threatening tone like it was nothing. Izumi shakily looked up to see familiar mess of wild blonde hair. Especially if they're standing around gawking like a FING tourist. He let out a derisive snort and started to walk away. "K. Kakin?" She spoke softly, barely believing it herself, but somehow he seemed to hear, stopping suddenly and slowly turning around. Beady red eyes glaring back at her, his anger melting away to confusion. He looked her up and down, she couldn't help but do the same. He'd grown since she'd last seen him. He was clearly taller, and despite the simple uniform it was clear he'd kept up his physical training. Deku, he muttered to himself, tone unclear. She must have changed more than she thought if he was this puzzled. She decided to take that as a compliment to her training rather than the more obvious and likely reason. Sorry for what happened back then. I never got to say that since, well. She trailed off unprepared for the meeting. She settled with offering a stiff bow. Slowly rising once more. For what it's worth, good luck. She offered the boy a small smile. It seemed to take him out of whatever funk he was in. He frowned deeply and turned away. Whatever, just stay out of my way, and with that he marched off. Izumi sighed and shook her head. Same old Kaken. So, that's the infamous Kaken. Jiru noted, watching the boy as he stomped off. He seems like a real winner. Her sarcasm was palatable. How could you ever hang out with a D like that? He wasn't as bad before his quirk manifested. Even Izumi knew that defense was weak, but she had to at least try. It's probably for the best things happen like they did, but I still can't help but admire him a little, she admitted with a sigh, melancholy seeping into her tone. Jiru hummed lightly, tilting her head to the side. You know, I never took you for one to be into bad boys, she mused aloud, nearly causing Izumi to trip on her own this time. It's always the quiet ones, isn't it? It's nothing like that. Despite herself, her face exploded into a bright red, embarrassment mixing with a little bit of disgust at the thought of it. Jiru's husky chuckle mingled low ambient chatter of the passing crowd. She offered a bemused smirk, and Izumi, rising tension faded, realizing she was just teasing. Pouting a little but unable to fully hide her smile, she swatted the brunette in the shoulder, and the two continued further into the campus, heart a little lighter as they entered the exam hall. The written exam was mostly a blur. Even with Cementos, the cement hero of all people, setting up the basics, the tension was just too high to appreciate it fully. Everyone kept in strict seating, working feverishly in silence. Izumi was fairly sure she got more right than wrong, but she'd have no way to know until she saw the results. The difficulty wasn't so much in the material being covered and more consistently open-ended questions that followed in the heroics portion. For a warrior like herself, it became very easy to second-guess her initial answer to a question or look for tricks in the wordings. By the time the final bell rang, she felt like she'd run a mental marathon. She wandered out into the hall in a daze, grateful for the reprieve before the practical testing would begin. Exhausted examines exchanged tense greetings and small talk. She picked a clear spot by one of the windows, not wanted to wade through the crowd of taller teens any longer than she had to. After all, when both you and your best friend are short, you have to get creative. She began to hum softly. It was simple tune she knew all too well. A jingle from one of All Might's old commercials. Most people forgot it long ago. Any minute now. She's over this way. Somewhere. Kyoka's faint voice came from the left. Izumi kept humming as she craned her neck looking for her friend. Finally, in a break in the crowd, they caught eyes. Stopping her tune, she waved her friend over to her spot by the window. Jiru slumped against the window, groaning. Man, that was intense. I know, I must have gone back over my answers 3 times apiece. So annoying. The brunette rubbed her temples as if a headache was coming on. Why couldn't they have been more clear with what they wanted? I wonder if that is the point. Izumi tapped her chin with a thoughtful frown. A hero's job is rarely straightforward after all. But indecision in a time of crisis will cause more harm than good, right? She shot back with a sigh. True, but if you limit your options to dash, maybe she could feel a rant coming because she preemptively raised a hand to halt it from continuing. You know, I just want to stop thinking for a while, Jiru cut in before a debate to fully spark. How about a walk? I think a little fresh air is in order before the next test. Izumi blinked, confused at the sudden conversation turn, before offering a shrug and a smile. Fair enough, lead the way, Kayakin. The duo took their leave. Heavy thoughts of tests and what-ifs replaced by a more casual discussion of any interesting examies they spotted. It seemed like Izumi was winning the impromptu contest with her notice of boy whose head was a speech bubble straight out of comic books, at least until her friend chimed in. I think there was a ghost girl 2 rows up from me. What do you mean, ghost? Izumi pressed. Her curiosity was starting to win out. I'm not sure how else to put it. She looked thoughtfully up to the sky. The only thing in the seat was a floating girl's school uniform. I couldn't get a much better look from my seat. A projection quirk of some kind? No, they would have to take the test in person for it to be valid. So either an unnecessarily complicated act of telekinesis or some form of invisibility. Izumi's brow furrowed. Invisibility could be a valuable skill in the field, but if her clothes are visible, that negates all the benefits. She pulled a notebook from her backpack and began quickly writing out her thoughts. Jairu face-bombed and let out a long sigh. I knew I shouldn't have brought up quirks, she grumbled as Izumi continued muttering to herself, oblivious to the world. Shaking her head, her ear Jack snaked over and tapped her friend on the cheek. The vibration of Jairu's steady heartbeat disrupting her train of thought, lingering long enough for Izumi to stop what she was doing. She slowly glanced up over her notebook. Yes. Put the notebook away, Izu, nerd out on your own time. Alright, sorry. Properly shamed, she placed her hero analysis notebook back in her bag. A digital bell rang clearly throughout the campus. All exam participants please report to the assembly hall for instructions, a robotic voice announced. The two friends nodded to each other and joined the small tide of prospects on their way back inside. The announcement rang one last time as the nervous masses outside filed back into the auditorium. For all you examinee listeners tuning in, welcome to my show today. Everybody say, hey. This request was met only with silence. Well, not entirely. It's the voice hero, present mic. Kia. Izumi tried to keep quiet, could barely repress the squeal that escaped her lips. I listen to him every week on the radio. I'm so moved, she whispered, bouncing a little in her seat. A light stab in her leg broke her focus, causing her to look around at all the annoyed, curious exams who had turned her way. Turning beet red, she looked down at her lap with a muttered apology. Jairu merely shook her head as she retracted her jack. With Cementos introducing the written portion of the exam and now this. Izumi continued softly. Does that mean all of the teachers here are pro-heroes? Present Mike went on to explain the exam, an urban battle scenario using robots to act as villains. It seemed in line with some of the other exams Izumi had heard about in her research, though she had hoped for something else. Reinforcement was a support power at heart. To use it offensively, she was going to have to get creative. In addition, green-haired girl. Her thought process shattered as a rather studious boy who had been asking a question turned all attention to her. You've been muttering and squealing this whole time. It's distracting. He glared, the spotlight above flashing off his glasses. If you're here for a pleasure trip, then you should leave immediately. The examies all around her snickered as she lowered her head again. Kyoka narrowed her eyes, holding a glare with the boy who'd singled her friend out. Ignore him, Izu, he's just talking out his butt. Jairu whispered, getting only a nod in reply. The confrontation over for now. Present Mike continued his explanation. The mysterious 0p obstacle got the whole room buzzing. The voice hero kept up his usual exuberance, finishing the presentation off with UA's school motto. Izumi put aside her embarrassment, focusing on the excitement filling her. The assembly hall began to empty as the prospects all headed off to their designated battlegrounds. Dang, even though our student numbers are next to each other, they put us in different zones. Jairu frowned at her paper. Yeah, I guess they don't want people who know each other to team up. It would probably skew the results. Izumi noted, biting her lip. Somehow the pressures of the test returned tenfold. Anxiety and doubts plaguing her mind. Izumi clenched her fist, looking determined. Well, I know you will be just fine. So I just give it my all and we'll get in together. She put her fist out in front of her. She had a brave face, but her arm was clearly shaking. All right, she voice cracked slightly but kept the determined smile on her face. Jairu smirked, bumping her fist against Izumi's. That's the attitude I want to see. Tension eased up in Izumi's shoulders, offering her friend a firm nod before they split up. Now it would be time to put all her hard work to the test. Battlefield B. A city in miniature created solely for hero testing and training. Having just one of these is an insane investment, and if what Present Mike said is to be believed, they had at least insane to even consider. Even for the most prestigious school in all of Japan. She looked up to the massive gates, trying to calm her pounding heart or shaky knees. Her resolve had diminished. Once she split from her friend, she'd be on her own for this. For the first time, she'd have to put her powers to the forefront. She looked to the charm on her wrist, a piece of hope given to her by her sensei. If she wanted to give it her all, she'd need to change. But doing it in front of all these strangers is too embarrassing, she squeaked pathetically, covering her face. Okay, kiddo, well, you knock him dead out there. With you mind focused, there's nothing they can throw at you that you cannot overcome. Just relax, girl, you got this. I'm proud of you, Izumi. She took a deep breath and stood up straight. She wasn't alone. Not with so many others rooting her on. With renewed determination, she gripped the star-like charm and whispered, "Pretty guardian. Transform." Though her trigger was silent, the rush of light and color caught the attention of her fellow examinees. They couldn't see under the soft green glow, but she could feel the familiar surge of power as the divine vestments formed over her, replacing her tracksuit. As the light bleed away, she stood proud, fists clenched at her side. The hell? What's with that outfit? She's pretty cute though. Did she bring that from home? Oh my gosh dash. So frilly. Izumi pushed back her tears, bringing a clenched fist up. Everyone is staring at me, she whimpered softly. This was more embarrassing than she could have imagined. What is the meaning of this? The studious boy from before rushed over to her, face stern. He loomed over her and crossed his arms. First the assembly and now this. This outfit. This is a mockery to this exam. He leaned right into her face and her resolve cracked. What? No, this is just. You think this is all some game? Tears came to her eyes unbidden. She turned her gaze away. Ignore him, Aizu, he's just talking out his butt. She turned back and looked the taller teen right in the eyes. I don't have to prove anything to you. Her voice was soft and wavering, but it did make the boy back off and give her space. What? Yeah, lay off the girl. A voice called out from the crowd by the gate. Soon joined by others. She can wear what she wants. It is fabulous. Leave her alone. Yeah, you bully. Be bully. He flinched at the word, looking between the crowd and Izumi. I didn't intend dash. Okay, start. Present Mick's voice boomed over all others. All eyes turned upward to the voice hero, perched up on a tower. What's wrong? There are not countdowns in real fights. The crowd started to scramble. Izumi took her chance and ran for the now open gates, anything to make some distance between herself and her harasser. Run. The die has been cast, you know. Everyone dispersed, looking for enemies to fight. Izumi ignored the first couple she saw as they were immediately dogpiled by multiple students. Robots, I need something that can fight against robots. She stopped at an intersection, coming face to face with a 2P villain. Instinctively, she backed away as the metal monster loomed above her. Target acquired. I'll kill you. With no other warning, it lunged for her at full speed. Her body froze up for a moment, panic starting to set in. Remember your training. Elward-sensei. Art, she cursed softly before focusing her power. Reinforce. She jumped, the divine vestments giving her the ability to easily clear the robot as it plowed past into the wall behind her. With the sound of grinding metal, half of the robot plowed clean through the building, the other half was stopped cold. The wall in question completely undamaged and faintly sparkling. She stumbled with her landing, unused to putting her boosted form in action. She looked back at her work, a smile crept onto her face. It worked. 2 points. She clenched her fist tightly, confidence soaring. I can do this. She took off down the road in search of more. 7 minutes remaining. A robot toppled as a glowing stop sign cleaved through its leg like it was nothing. Izumi pulled it free and stuck it through the robot's head and into the concrete. 9 points, stay calm. The villain's AI was straightforward and uncomplicated from what Shay was able to gather. It sought out any examies in range and was attracted to loud conflicts. The main streets were an open melee of prospects battling to get the final blow on any bot that they could reach. Smart money would be to pick off villains as they congregated toward those large conflicts. She'd already noticed a few others catch on. One sniping away with a massive laser before relocating so not to be swarmed. Another with multiple arms dropping down on bots from above and overpowering them before they could retaliate. So many amazing quirks, but I have to focus on myself. She almost didn't hear the rumble of the approaching villain until it was on top of her. It burst through the wall, sending her flying across the street. The three-pter closed the distance in her daze, preparing to smash down before it twitched and went limp, red eye dimming to black. "Thanks for the distraction," came a cheerful girl's voice. Izumi looked around but couldn't see anyone. "Wait, you're the magical girl." There was the lightest of taps as a pair of sneakers fell off from behind the robot, and then ran toward him. Huh! The sneakers stopped just in front of her and she could feel someone invading her personal space. She took a step back reflexively. Izumi thought back to Kyoka's comment earlier. The only thing in the seat was a floating girl's school uniform and no body. The invisible girl. But this time it's only sneakers. If this girl couldn't make her clothing invisible, it really only meant one thing. The guardian in training flushed brightly at the thought. She had enough trouble using her divine vestments in public. This girl was definitely strong in her own way. "Don't play coy, I know a magical girl outfit when I see one." The girl voice was right next to her, seemingly taking her embarrassed look as a more personal feeling rather than in relation to herself. "I thought I was a big fan, but you really put your all into the execution. You must be a fan of the classics. What archive community do you follow?" "I'm sorry, I'm not sure I follow." Izumi focused her mind away the girl's lack of clothes, unsure what she was going on about. "You don't have to be embarrassed, there's pre-quirk media for all kinds of people." She tried to sound supportive but trailed off. "You're serious?" "That would mean dash. 4 minutes 25 seconds. Mick's voice boomed through the battleground, immediately bringing a sense of urgency to the situation. "Shoot, so little. Sorry, but I need to go." W8. But Izumi was already running. She didn't know where the threshold of success was, but she knew it was going to be more than 9 points. Target acquired. Behind, Izumi turned to see another 3 points villain charging straight forward. She scanned her immediate area for some improvised weapons to use, catching a sight of sneakers between herself and the villain. "Look out!" Reinforce. From nothing, an outline of sparkles showed the curved figure of a girl. Just as the robot swung its arm in a wide arc, knocking the invisible Izumi off her feet and into the wall, a trail of sparkles following her to the point of impact. The bot unfortunately remained focused on its prey and turned to the down girl as she struggled to stand. Crap! Izumi jumped onto the thing's back looking for any weak point to exploit, at least to distract it somehow. There's an off switch, just behind its head. "It's hidden," the invisible girl shouted as she struggled to her feet. "Okay." Taking the girl's advice, she scrambled up to the robot's head and felt around. There was a switch. One flick and the whole thing powered down. Both girls let out a sigh of relief. "Are you okay?" "Why yeah, that just knocked the wind out of me. But it should have done a lot more than that." There was a small tremble of fear in her voice that must have been the first clean hit she'd taken the whole exam. "I used my quirk to strengthen your body. I've never really used it on anyone at a fight yet. I'm glad it worked." She smiled happily. 3 minutes. We'll talk later. Izumi leapt from the robot and headed back to the main road. The distant foot taps of the invisible student behind her lost as the sound of battle increased again. In the distance, robots rained from the sky around a brown-haired girl who looked tired and pale. The studious JRK who had been harassing her rocketed through one with a mighty kick. Everyone was giving it their all. That was until IT showed up. The ground shook. The thundering sound of grinding treads and crumbling concrete drew everyone's attention. The Zeropter. It towered over the buildings, looking down on the examies like they were insects. An obstacle that will go crazy in narrow spaces. I recommend you listeners try to avoid it. A massive fist swung and hit the ground with a force that nearly knocked Izumi from her feet with wind pressure alone. Everyone panicked and scattered away from the monstrous robot. Isn't this going overboard? Izumi tried to tear her eyes away from the robot and start running herself. If she just avoided the big lug, surely there were a few more stragglers to get. Ow! She froze again, turning as the smoke started to clear. There was a girl on the ground, barely moving. Behind her a two-story tank tread approached. She was in its direct path. With a burst of adrenaline, Izumi turned and charged back toward the gimmick. If she didn't do something, that girl would be crushed. She summoned up all the power she could muster and narrowed her eyes. Reinforce! She held her arms toward the giant robot. The sound of metal grinding on metal drowned out everything else. The treads slowed to a crawl as if fighting something. 1 year ago, Izumi sat on the living room floor in her exercise clothes. Her usual regime of exercise was done, so it was now time for her magic lesson. Now, Izumi, we are going to try something a little different today for your magic instructions. This will be about precision over power, so you shouldn't need to transform. Elward pushed a pocket watch between the two of them, choosing to ignore the girl's sigh of relief. I want you to use your magic on this watch. Yes, Sensei. She looked to the watch and raised her hand over it. After the moment, the watch was covered in the telltale sparkles of reinforce. What you are doing right now, it reinforcing its outer shell, protecting it from damage much like any other object. The cat explained, but a watch is made up of many moving parts and mechanisms. He pointed a claw at the pocket watch. In the upper corner there was a decorative window to the turning gears inside. I want you to use reinforce on one of the mechanisms inside the watch. It's your choice. Okay. Izumi frowned, a bit unsure where this was all going. She'd already practiced focusing her quirk into small objects. The sparkles left the watch and she focused on what gears she could see. She could feel her magic take hold and the watch ground to a near stop. It was fighting to keep functioning. What? You see it, do you not? The reinforced gear. It's not turning. Reinforcement magic uses power to increase the strength and durability of an object or living being. Her sensei began, it prevents other forces from acting against it. Thus the gear you're reinforcing requires more force to be moved. Power this small device simply doesn't possess. The girl's eyes widened as the truth of the lesson dawned on her. In my world there were few such devices, but here there are many. He smirked slightly, revealing his fangs. Something I'm sure you can put to great use. Less the 2 minutes. Izumi grit her teeth, putting everything she had into pumping as much reinforce into the looming treads. She had no idea of the internal mechanics of this robot, but tread mobility was something she could wrap her head around. The giant 2-story wheels sparkled brightly as they failed to turn, unable to move forward, and crushed the student. Thank you, Sensei. She whispered to herself before glancing to the girl in question, who was watching her in awe. See, can you move? Not much, I overused my quirk. She sounded like she was going to be sick but managed to choke it down. This wasn't good. Izumi wasn't sure how long she could hold it off. If she lost focus for even a second. I got her. A pair of sneakers ran past her toward the downed Izumi. Relief pushed away the growing doubt, and she doubled down on her focus, hearing the satisfying metal groan get louder. The invisible girl helped push the debris off the trapped girl and brought her to her feet. Arm over one invisible shoulder, they started to hobble for safety. As they passed Izumi, she called out again. We're clear. All right. Izumi released her hold on the treads, dizzy from all the strain. She didn't have time to catch her breath, turning and racing after the other girls. There might still be a few robots. Time's up. Mike's voice boomed across the battlefield. A siren swiftly followed, and all tension left Izumi's body. Bracing herself on her knees to keep from falling, her divine vestments faded away in a trail of glittery sparkles, returning her to her tracksuit. Her hair losing some of its volume and luster as if fell over her face. I guess 12 points will have to do, she sighed to herself before looking over to the other two girls. Her personal disappointment outweighed by the others' safety. Thank you so much. The brown-haired girl bowed deeply despite being seated. Something she likely regretted as she nearly threw up from the sudden motion. Don't worry about it, the invisible girl said cheerfully. Despite having no visible indication, he felt as if the girl had looked her way. A hero can't just stand by and watch someone get squished. Right? Right? Izumi agreed with a smile. He felt the rush of her personal space being invaded once more, the sneakers right up in front of her own. But that was so cool. How did you manage to stop that thing? I thought your quirk was for buffing. Well, a gust of chilly February air blew by causing her to squeak and jump. It seemed after the excitement of the test over reality started to set in. Hold that thought, I need to go get something to wear. She sprinted off muttering darkly about having outdoor tests at this time of year. Izumi couldn't help but giggle a bit at the absurdity of it all. Wait, does that mean this whole time she was Dash? The brown-haired girl turned a deep shade of pink. It's best not to think too hard on it. The green-haired girl offered her hand. Do you need any help getting back to the entrance? And no, I just need to sit for a bit. She smiled brightly. I'll be fine, please go on ahead. Respecting the girl's wishing, she offered and nodded and walked off. Sore but satisfied. I hope 28 points will be enough, she heard the girl whispered, her own doubts returning. She hadn't even reached half that score. This test really was skewed for combat quirks. She sighed, trying not to think too darkly on it. I hope Kayakin did okay. She looked back up, catching a glance from the studious boy who was watching her intently. Flushing at the attention, she did her best to ignore him as she walked back to the gate. Hello, young lady. A kindly voice brought Izumi back to reality. She looked down to a little old lady with a cane in the style of a syringe. The elderly woman smiled up to her. Good job, would you like some gummies? You're the youthful heroine, recovery girl. She squealed happily. The title may be a little out of date, but she was one of the most famous healers in the pro-hero community. Though she retired from active duty many years ago, her services were clearly still in high demand if she was working here. This is so cool. It's nice to see the younger generation still remembers. She chuckled softly, giving the girl a few gummy bears for her trouble. I do apologize, but I have a lot of work to do. Why, yes, of course. She jumped aside despite not really being in the old woman's way. She toddled off down the road, healing up any of the injured examinees she passed with a kiss on the cheek. I suppose having a healer of that caliber lets them have dangerous tests like this, she mused. It put the whole test and its extremes in a lot more clarity. In the end, it didn't matter too much. All that could be done is go home, rest, and wait for the scores to be tallied up. It was late afternoon when it all wrapped up. Kyoka had reconnected with her back in the locker room. Now that was a rush, she smirked as she changed into a fresh shirt, one she'd worn in the test torn and dirty. It took a while for me to get started, but once I found the weak spots, they were easy to drop. Oh, how many PTS did you get? The number 12 bubbled up, but she stuffed it down. This wasn't a contest, not between friends at least. Huh, you know, I wasn't really keeping track. The brunette tilted her head to the side. I kind of figured keeping score was the prodder's job, so why bother with the details? Just focus on getting as many as I could. She shrugged lightly, looking unconcerned. As expected from you, Kayakin, you can always keep your head under pressure. Izumi smiled softly to her friend as she slipped her skirt back on. I had to scramble to find things that would work. Walls, railings. Maybe I should have stuck with that stop sign, she mused thoughtfully. It wasn't a very heroic image, a girl in a frilly skirt swinging around a stop sign like an axe. Jaira must have been thinking something similar because she started chuckling. Sounds pretty cool to me, wish I'd seen it. She sat down, pulling on her socks. Oh, I saw your old buddy in the battleground. Kakin? Really? She glanced over, surprised. Yeah, he was something else. Surrounded by destroyed bots. No one could hope to keep up with all that. I'm surprised I was able to even get as many bots as I did with him destroying so many. That sounds like him, he really is amazing, she said with a small solemn smile. It seems like he did well. That's good. He's a beast, I'll give him that. What kind of quirk could even let you do that? Explosion, Izumi replied immediately, not even looking up from straightening her neck bow. The sweat from his palms is kind of like nitroglycerin. He can ignite it and set off an explosion. So the longer a fight goes on, the more he sweats. He can just keep fueling it? Kyoka whistled, that's hard to beat when it comes to combat. No wonder. She slipped her shoes on before frowning a bit and glancing to her friend. Did he use it on you? Her voice was soft and tone serious. Izumi flinched a bit but forced a smile. A few times when we were younger. Before I moved away at least. He'd threaten more often than not, but he knew better than to use it in school. In school was the important note to add, but she could tell by her friend's darkening expression she could see through it. That is all in the past anyway. Yeah, it is. Kyoka stood and slipped on her jacket. Because if he tries any of that shit again, he's going to regret it. Kayakin. Izumi could feel her eyes mist up and she wiped them preemptively. Was this the kind of thing she was missing all those years ago? She was blessed. Man, that really turned the mood sour. She muttered, fiddling with her left jack. Sorry, Aizu, look, let's just forget about him and go celebrate. Kay. Sure, I'd like that. I should probably let my mom know. She shouldered her backpack and pulled her phone from the side pouch. What did you have in mind? HM. A real release would be nice after all this stressful stuff. The usual, she mused with a small smile. Karaoke it is, she replied in kind. That was the old standby, it was how they first became friends after all. Maybe it could take away the worry she was feeling over her low score. Oh, it's you. A voice called up over the mild din of the locker room. A floating uniform with baby blue backpack raced over to the pair as they were closing their lockers. I thought I missed you there for a moment. She was just as cheerful as she had been in the battleground. We didn't really get to talk with the robots and time limit and all. Ah, true. Izumi managed a reply, not having expected to run into the girl again. Her wearing more clothes was almost more surreal than having a conversation with a pair of sneakers. The girl was clearly energetic, speaking with exaggerated movements. But considering the nature of her quirk, one could hardly blame her. So this is the ghost girl? Jiru asked with a raised eyebrow. Invisible, not a ghost, though I'm a hit at Halloween parties. She gave a mock salute, presumably since you can't see her hand or forehead. Hagakure Toru at your service. Midoriya Izumi, she said softly before motioning to her left. And this is my friend Jiru Kyoka. Sup. Well, I was hoping we could talk a bit after our whole epic team-up, but I couldn't help but overhear you were going to karaoke? Toru asked, hopefully, empty sleeves pulling up to her chin. Izumi could feel the puppy dog look even without seeing it. Any chance there's room for one more? I don't really mind. What about you, Kayakin? Sure, why not? The brunette said with a shrug. We're all in the same boat today after all, no reason not to let loose, she added with a hint of a smirk. Sweet. The invisible girl pumped her fist, her energy infectious. The three girls left the campus amidst lively chatter, promises of sugary drinks and soundproofed rooms in their future. Izumi couldn't think of a better way to end the day.